School and to St. James Speaks. As you can see, Prime Minister and the full team has arrived, and we are therefore ready to begin. Again, the ground rule, if you are planning to speak tonight, you need to or should have by now gone to the PMO table over on my left, registered and gotten a number. Once you've done that, please sit in one of these seats that are separated from the others. So if you've already registered and you're planning to speak, you should be in one of these seats here. If you've not registered, you shouldn't be in one of these seats here. Oh, sorry.
Issues that will explode in the country's face.
Once you have gone to the mic and you've spoken, then you can sit anywhere else in the auditorium, leaving those seats free for the next set of people who are about to speak. Without further ado, since we are quite late, we will go straight to the head table. With you tonight would be Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Moore-Motley. On my far left would be the Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Santia Bradshaw, the MP for St. James South, the Honorable Sandra Husbands, St. James North, the Honorable, I'm getting old now, Edmund Hinkson, Eddie, forgive me. MP for St. James Central, the Honorable Kerry Simmons, and of course, the Attorney General and MP for St. Joseph, the Honorable Dale Marshall. Prime Minister?
Yes. They want me to play drums. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to St. James Speak. The acoustics in this hall are only worsened by the acoustics in Dighton Griffith, which has the same layout, and St. Leonard's School, which regrettably has not mastered the art of acoustics. So I'm going to play with you guys in the back until you take all of the tinniness and echo out of my voice, so that when these good people start to speak in the middle, that I am not struggling to hear them. And if my face starts to contort, they do not believe that it is because of what they are saying, but that it is purely because I feel I need to go for some hearing tests. Okay? You're still not there. Who's doing the song, please? Where's the song man? Keep playing. It's too tinny. It needs to be warmer, rounder, and louder. Are we good? Not yet. You almost sung as though you have a reverb on my voice. Huh? Let's go again. Any more? Better? Coming? Let's keep going. You happy? We can live with that, audience. It's still a little tinny. It was a little better just now. Take off some of the tinniest, please. No, I spent too much time managing a band as a young person. All right, that's a little better. We can live with that. It's not perfect, but everybody can hear. People at the back, you good? All right, let's go. Let me first of all welcome everyone and get straight into it so that we can answer everyone's queries. Where are the mics for the people up front? So can somebody bring, Roy, where are you? Bring the mics, huh? Yeah, but they're all up front, so bring them closer. So I don't mind if they don't see me, I'm not pretty. Let the mic go somewhere closer, because the notion of having somebody way from us can't work. I'm having a conversation with the person who's talking with us. If they just take it and come to the side here, it would be a little better. Thanks. I must say that the hall looks significantly better than last year. So I'd like, where's the principal again, to thank you and to thank for how the hall looks and the job clearly that has been done to start to spruce up. One of the complaints we've made is that a lot of these World Bank design schools have gone back, Tinny Skipper. A lot of these World Bank design schools were dark, dreary, and dismal. If you recall, it was gray concrete before. So we're trying to see how we can at least lighten the colors and lift the ventilation and the space for the kids who have to be here. Let's start. Thank you. This is still giving trouble, so keep playing with it, sir.
Pleasant good night, Madam Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Attorney General.
The mic for the people who are speaking in front is not on, sir. Go ahead. Try.
Pleasant good night, Madam Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Attorney General, ladies and gentlemen. My concern is how long does it take you to become medically unfit? I had 2 strokes, one in 2019 and one 2021, and I almost lose my hand after.
Okay. Because it's a personal matter,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to ask you to go on site. They'll take the information and Mr. Morris will get back to you. And I will speak generically. I'm not even going to take your name because that is a matter for you. And I've said that these town hall meetings are not for people to embarrass themselves.
Yes,
if they're personal matters, we still take the information, but every day I get dozens of emails from him
Yes,
about matters that he is resolving. Okay? So if I can ask you to go on site and he will tell you where to go to give the information. But let me address the issue of medical boarding now. We have determined that there has to be a change in how medical boarding is done. It is too complex. It is too cumbersome, and the government finds itself having to carry persons who genuinely need to be able to retire on the basis of medical issues are then left in limbo for too long. So that is one of the things that we are trying to reform within the context of the Ministry of Health and the National Insurance Board working together. So if you come, and Roy, if they can meet him halfway and take the information. Sorry? All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mom.
Take care. Just pass the mic to the gentleman behind you. Thank you, sir, and I wish you very much better. Okay?
Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Prime Minister,
Thanks. You may want to come and stand now. He didn't stand because of his condition.
That's fine.
So that the others can see you and hear you as well. Thank you.
This way around. Do it again. Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I'm here on behalf of a group of people who live around the planned Eden Grove project.
Okay, if you can, I really am not hearing you. And I don't think anybody in the back is hearing you. We are having serious problems tonight with sound. Please.
Hello? Better?
I can hear you a little better now. And I'm gone back tinny. And
Can you hear it?
back in.
Is it better? Yeah? Can it go? We are concerned because...
What's your name, sir?
Tony Timmer. Tony Timmer. Timmer, yes. Timmer. Pandanus Great House in St. Peter.
Tonight is only St. James. So if you have an issue, Mr. Morris can help you, but we've taken a very strong stand from St. Joseph that we only take the people who live in the parish. Okay? So if not, it's going to become incapable of management and resolution. That does not mean that your issue will not be addressed, but I need to hold a line with those who get to speak publicly to the residents of it. So, Roy, you can take care of Mr. Timmer.
Yeah.
Thank you. I suspect your problem is in St. Peter too, isn't it?
It is.
Exactly. So I can't deal with it, but I know
Yeah, but is the development in St. Peter or is it in St. James?
it's in St. Peter, the parish of St. Peter, isn't it?
The Eden Grove development in
It's in
Gibbs
St.
Bay.
Peter. It's in the parish of St. Peter. Okay?
Right.
So that's part of the difficulty. But if we don't do that, we can't manage people every month. So I'm not trying to be difficult. Thank you. Who's next?
My honorable, my name is Selma Aline. You said that you're just dealing with St. James tonight. My problem is in St. Peter, in Mullins, St. Peter.
It seems as though I can have a St. Peter meeting on the side of Mike. One side, thanks. You just hold.
Which is Mike.
No problem. Mr. Morris is going to take care of all of you and the people who are doing this.
Let me hold it in my hand because you can't get behind it unless you move these chairs. Move these chairs. Yeah, these chairs.
Next one.
Okay, thank you. Evening, Prime Minister and ministers and members of Parliament. I seem to be coming through nice and loud here now. And I am from St. James, Robin Mahan. I'm here as a homeowner in Whole Town and as a small tourism property operator. And I want to raise a very long-standing issue that we have in Whole Town with the boardwalk and access. Well, beach access is a problem generally, we all know that, but with the boardwalk coming south, we have a problem where we cannot access for much of the year onto the beach to the south of the beach house in front of what was the old Chefette property.
But I genuinely am having problems hearing you clearly. And I'm just asking the gentleman at the back to please help us. I'm not fooling you now.
Shall I keep going? Yeah. Okay, so during the construction of the boardwalk, there was an issue that developed there, and the end of the boardwalk is blocked by boulders for a significant part of the year. I believe you visited down there recently, and you probably found that it was very sandy and nice, which is something that happens for only a few months of the year. But usually you cannot get onto the beach, you cannot get across the boulders without going along private land, which was the old Chefette land. And we have been trying for several years to get that dealt with. Baird has offered a solution, and it is...
I must tell you, Mr. Mahan, that is the first time I'm hearing about it.
Okay.
And what disturbs me is that I have asked Coastal Zone for a plan that I am still waiting on a few months ago to be able to deal with all of the beach erosion from St. Lucie to the port. Because it is my judgment, and we've said it to them, that we cannot keep doing a piece here and then forget about the next, and a piece there, and then a piece there, and that what we need is a holistic plan that allows us to be able to see how we can reclaim the beaches of the West Coast. I've equally said to them that I'm prepared to support the Bridgetown Port going after and purchasing again a dredge and is two things, what it is now. The dredger and the barge and the dredger in order to be able to deal with the sand. We even were then told there are two potential locations for sand, that we're generating 80,000 tons of sand a year in the south, but that we actually have a location off Old Town that can provide the sand, and that will be far more cost effective as the first solution, and if we need to, then we barge from the south. So I say all of that to let you know that we have been in active discussion, but what has never been raised with me, and I'm going to ask Antonio Rowe to speak to it, is this area with the boulders, with the incapacity to be able to resolve it. So government can only make decisions on the basis of what is before it. And I thank you for raising it, but I'm going to ask Mr. Rowe also if he is aware of what you are speaking of, and how and when I can have the Ministry of Finance be put in the same position, because we are now getting ready to deal with estimates for next year. And as you would appreciate, if ever there was a time to include for consideration in the government's public sector investment program, it is now. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much, Prime Minister. If I could just finish by saying that there have been quite a few injuries along there by people trying to get on the beach, including a broken leg.
Which means that the AG then is not a happy man. And the Minister of Finance is a less happier woman.
Okay, well, I'm done.
Thank you for bringing it to our
Thank you very much.
attention. Mr. Rowe?
I look forward to hearing what Mr. Rowe has to say.
Because you may want to engage with.
Hi, good night. Good night, everybody. My name is Antonio Rowe, Deputy Director, Coastal Zone Management Unit. Yes, Mr. Mahon, you know that I know about the situation. The challenge we are having there is that the boulders that you're speaking of are actually owned by a private individual. The people who actually, the boulders actually belong to the revetment, to the Chafet site owners. So we've got in contact with them to ask them if, you know, we can move them or whatever. But we've also asked Beard to look, as you know, at a solution. And they recently submitted, they have 3 options. So we're going to have to submit that to the Prime Minister. But I would like to say to the Prime Minister, we also did finish the report that you had asked, and we had submitted it. We had submitted it to the PS.
Relates to
West Coast.
Protecting the whole West Coast.
Yes.
What Mr. Mahon is asking for is Professor?
Yes,
Professor Mahon is asking for is a different matter. And that is, do you have boulders at the end? Is it unfinished work? And how do we correct it so that people don't fall and end up suing government, and the government has to pay out money anyhow?
There's two sets of boulders, and this is finished work. But unfortunately, as Mr. Mahon said, those boulders are protecting the walkway from the waves. But they're usually covered with sand. But with the swells and climate change, there are periods where those boulders are exposed. One set belongs to the private property.
So if they're covered with sand, just bear with me. That means that somebody just has to go and move the sand like they move the sargassum seaweed, correct?
Well, we don't want the sand moved. The sand is, when the sand is there, it's good for them. It's when the sand is moved that is a problem.
Well,
when
then,
the sand.
what is the solution?
It's not usually there. The sand is occasionally there. Most of the time it's not. And I accept Mr. Rowe's explanation. Several of the boulders were moved there from the revetment to the boardwalk to protect the land at the request of the Chafet person. And what was done did not work out. And Baird, the engineers who did the boardwalk, have proposed a solution which is not a very costly one, and which I think would work. And I'd like you guys to explore it.
Who presented the solution, Baird?
Baird was approached, and one of their engineers, who is a Barbadian and is very interested in the problem, offered the solution.
I just would like to see the solution so we can make decisions. And if Coastal Zone has it, I have to ask the Minister and Coastal Zone, why are you keeping it to yourselves? My eyes nor ears will not be defiled. Okay? Thank you, Professor.
Thank you
We
very
will
much.
follow up and get back to you. I'll ask Mr. Morris to get back to you within the next few weeks to let you know what action will be taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
Thank you.
And then once you speak, you start speaking.
My name is Frederick. Mr. Hampton had invited me here this evening, but I think what had happened is that there's a little bit of confusion on St. James Law vote. Can people vote for St. James Law?
Understand that, but we're trying to deal with the St. Peter people separate because there's no way for us to be able to articulate that tonight.
Right.
So those who have come from St. Peter, I'm not sending you back empty-handed. What I'm asking for Roy to do is to have a desk separately, and we will treat to the St. Peter issues when I finish with the public broadcast, because we've had to take a position. If not, it becomes impossible to manage it by parish each month.
You understand?
Okay. So
What I think the ad must say is that they will find up the ad and they will let people know that they have to have a parish rather than consistency.
I can understand. Thank you very much. Can we move to the next person? Thank you. You can stay sitting, sir, if you want. Okay. But what's happening tonight in truth? Well, then you may have to take off the air conditioner and we take the heat in order to hear. So it's one of the two, but it can't continue where I have to keep going to people to understand what they're saying. I asked the Deputy Prime Minister if she understood, or Sandra. They're not understanding. So at least I know it's not me that needs, at least I know I'm not turning like Eric Williams yet. I understand, but it means that everybody will be quick and I will hear them. So let's go. If the songman can't help me, then this can't work. Go ahead, sir.
A very good night to you, Madam Prime Minister, to all ministers, and a good night to everyone. My name is Patrick Williams, and I'm from St. James.
My name is Pamela Small Williams, and we are husband and wife, and we do live at Garden Terrace, Taylor's Gap, Weston, St. James. 13 Garden Terrace, Taylor's Gap, Weston, St. James.
Williams.
Williams.
Williams. I'm here to speak about a congestion in the same
Taylor's
T-
Gap.
the same Taylor's Gap, which is the road leading to St. Albans Primary School. It happens in the morning at school time, but it even gets worse in the afternoon, just before 3 o'clock. This road is a cul-de-sac, and there are about 50 homes within this gap.
This is because of people going to pick up the children from the school.
This is because people going to pick up children at
So
school.
what you would like is for Public Works to come down there and see how we can better manage the traffic.
What I would like is to see there's a connecting road that you could access
So that's still
Crick Hill.
Right, so there's still a traffic management
Right.
Yes.
solution.
Yes.
So what I'm suggesting is that the Deputy Prime Minister can arrange for her team to come down and to be able to see what are the possible options that will help ease, because what you're suggesting is that people who live there are affected
Yes.
as a result of the cars coming in.
Yes.
Yes, because
Okay. All right, let us look at it and give you the commitment, Santia. She will have the officers come down at some point in the next, week, 10 days? Within the next 2 weeks, to make sure that everything, and that we can have an answer back, and Mr. Morris then will keep you in touch. When the officers come, you'll probably need to be there for the site visit and any other residents from the area, so they'll give you advance notice.
okay.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Yes.
No, because we said that this problem, and we thank you, Prime Minister, because we have seen tempers flared and children being in imminent danger because one side the cars are parked all the time and the children only have the other side. So we are thanking you for quick action.
If I could have another couple of minutes. Just to the east of here is Trent's, and east of here and west of Portville, there's about 30 acres of land that was not in use for almost 50 years. When I was
Where exactly is the land?
west of,
No, what's the name of the district the land is in? Is it Trent's? Is it Portville? Is it what? I just need to write down so I know.
this is Trent's,
Trent's, fine.
but part of it linked into the west of the same Portville, which is the old Blowers. Some of this land was used by the persons from up the hill here, which is Greenwich Village. My grandfather and his friends used to work that land, but it was taken away from them all those almost 50 years ago, and it was just there, just there, and trees growing, and it seemed like it is another place on the island because no one goes there, but it's nice land. 30 acres of land or more, just on the hill here. I would really like to speak about coastal conservation, not as the Coastal Conservation Management Unit, but what is going on along the coast, because for many years there were plans to have a storage system on the west coast of this island. And what we have seen is the degradation of the coral reefs for over 40 years and nothing happening. And when Dr. Mahal was actually speaking about the sand and the boulders, I think what we need is some way to manage what goes on in the coastal area so that the coral reefs would start to rejuvenate, because all we have is dying coral reefs, and if the coral reefs are dying, and we come and we do all the construction and infrastructure along the coastline, we are still back to square one. I personally have seen the reefs going from here, there, over the last 40 years. So is it possible that the government can look at a storage system for the West Coast? I know that over the years, the Barbados Water Authority, they did all of the studies, they did the traffic management and all, but the funding for such a system, about 25 years ago, I was hearing that it was about 400 million US. It's probably about $500 million US now to really store the West Coast. And the method that I was told that they were trying to use to get funding, it was something similar to how you would go to build a building and the building would be the security. But who is going to fund?
You want me to help you? Let me help you. For as long as I have been in public life, there has been talk of a West Coast sewage system. And the reality is that between Bridgetown and the South Coast, both of which were done since 1975 probably, we have now to redo the South Coast one, as you know. About 2.5, 3 years ago, Dr. Hugh Seeley, God bless his soul, who was departed, and Dr. Mwanza were given the task by Cabinet to be able to look at a proposal from Dr. Seeley that I'm going to ask Mr. Leslie to speak to, and which we have more or less accepted because they took a while before they settled and resolved that this potentially could be the way forward in terms of the injection wells and a reverse osmosis plant, which would be a far cheaper solution than building a traditional West Coast sewage treatment plant. The government, as we speak, and it was week before last Wednesday, we met with the Inter-American Development Bank, the European Investment Bank, and the Green Climate Fund, because having done last year a debt for nature swap, where we bought back $150 million of Barbados's debt, had it reissued at cheaper interest rates, and used the interest savings over 15 years to finance a Barbados Marine Conservation Trust. So we will get anywhere between 50 to 60 million US dollars in the next 15 years without increasing our debt, but allowing us to spend the money year by year over a 15-year period to be able to preserve the waters. This time, we are looking for a debt for climate swap. And what we are doing is looking to repurchase 300 million this time US. And in repurchasing that, to be able to have the interest savings that we will get in the debt for climate swap to finance the tertiary treatment plant that is to go at the South Coast in Graham Hall. And that will allow us then to treat the sewage and to have the water replenish the aquifers and, if necessary, be used for agricultural purposes. Because what you're getting then is clean water. Okay? We hope that we can get that completed in the next, 12 months? That is just the financing part of it. And then, of course, you have to go to the execution part, which should take about 18 months or so. So we hope that within the next 2.5 years or sooner, we can take care of that. In the meantime, we have asked them and the Water Authority to be able to settle and resolve on the West Coast. Because if I told you, and most Barbadians would not know this, all the talk, and this is why we've been fighting so hard to be able to get the partners internationally in order to be able to do these kinds of innovative things where you can get 50 million US one way and possibly 80, 90 million, I don't know how much is going to come from the debt for climate swap, but enough to finance the majority, if not all, of the upgrade of the South Coast sewage treatment plant to tertiary. We are doing this without increasing a cent in debt. But that is because we have built credibility in being able to discuss the climate issues and to show that water scarcity
is already a problem before the climate crisis really started to be exacerbated for us. And therefore, we need to be able to work with the partners in order to be able to see how we can maintain our debt, but get the additional money to do things that if we weren't using this modality, we would have to look for another, in the case of the blue bonds, another 100 to 120 million Barbados dollars in debt. Don't have that over the next 15 years. We're similarly trying to do that with South Coast. Now, I have put in our back pocket, when the Water Authority finishes, that is obviously the third thing that we want to go for with a debt for climate swap. If we can't get the whole amount, we get what we can, and the government puts the difference to there. So when you see me in New York last week talking about climate issues or the climate future ambition and all of these things, or with the head of the World Bank twice last week, it is because if we don't innovate, a crisis that we did not create is causing us to go in our pockets and pull money. Now that would be like me living next door to you, both Mr. and Mrs. Williams, dumping on your property, and then you have to go and spend the money to clean up your property, and worse still, I flooding it out too when there's heavy rain. Now that can't be fair, because Kerry and Santia will tell you, and the AG, and Eddie, that in private law, that would be a tortious interference with your property. And you would then have the right to sue me for what I am doing. And that technically, internationally, Minister Ford would tell you, that the world says they respect polluter pays principle. So who pollutes must pay. Problem is, they haven't accepted it with climate. So that we are getting, first 6 months of this year, half the rainfall than the last 30 years. Whose fault is that? That's the climate. And here, everybody complaining in Barbados for heat the last few weeks. Now you know why. Because the world is not going to be going through all of this, and Barbados insulated as much as I would like it to be. So when we have to go and make the case for Water Authority to get $80 million in grant money, it's because of what the world is doing to us. But if we don't go and make the case, what will happen? You get what?
Right.
Nothing. Right? So I'd like to ask Mr. Leslie to please come and explain, because I'm not an engineer, but to explain what, I see you sending it to Alex, to come and explain what Dr. Seeley so eloquently advocated to the cabinet, and then the cabinet asked Dr. Seeley and Dr. Mwanza to meet. They settled, and I think we have a settled approach based on when we went to Colleton, and we looked at the possibility of these injection wells. But I'll leave the technical details to them now. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, he'll address you, so you can sit if you want while he addresses.
Hey, got Mike.
I think we have
S9249 Toyota. Would you please move your vehicle? Thank you.
Good night, Alex Seifel, Barbados Water Authority. The major impact of, now I sound tinny, the major impact of in the coral reefs on the west coast, particularly around Barbados, is nitrate pollution from the housing on the land, where we are all using our septic wells, and nitrates, the fertilizer from the toilets, are going into the water. And studies done by Environment and by Barbados Water Authority and by Coastal shows that the level of nitrates reaching the coast is significantly higher than you would expect. Now, the proposal that Dr. Seeley made had two advantages, in that it seek to scavenge that water that's loaded to nitrates going to the sea that can impact the coral reefs and your nearshore fisheries. And it also provides a source of fresh water inland, because the idea is to have the water treated by desalination, remove the nitrates and some salts, and take the water and then add this to our water supply. So it then serves a dual purpose, where people live in St. James know how in the dry season the water can taste a bit salty. So you get the dual advantage of protecting your coastal area and your coral reefs, and at the same time providing an extra source of drinking water for Barbados. As the Prime Minister said, we are a water scarce country, and as the impacts of climate hits us more and more each year, the stresses on those water resources go up. So that is, in a nutshell, the plan that Dr. Seeley made. And in relation to the former West Coast plans, this is a much more advantageous system, because you're not wasting water to the sea or so, but you have a dual purpose system.
Thank you. And may I say, Alex, that is exactly what we're trying to do at the South Coast as well, by ensuring that we treat the water fully and replenish the aquifers, and if necessary, use it for agricultural production, correct?
Right. Into St. Philip and the areas around, and also the Bridgetown plant is to go to tertiary treatment also. That can add into those areas that will increase the water supply by diverting that water that every person complains about going to the sea, and it will have a useful purpose for farming and also to stop saltwater intrusion.
All right. We're doing Bridgetown as a separate project. We don't have a cost on Bridgetown yet.
Not yet.
We're doing the debt for climate swap is for South Coast. Now for the West Coast, part and parcel of what you would not have heard from him is that when the government changed on the last occasion, the last government had given out contracts for 2 desal plants without any kind of understanding as to how that would be accommodated in the distribution system, correct?
Right.
So that each plant was for 6 million gallons, and then Ionics was ramped up by 3 million.
3 million gallons.
So you had 15 million gallons extra a day committed on what is known as a take or pay contract. So whether you take it or you don't take it, you do what? You pay for it. And our contention was that was reckless, and that if you wanted, we cannot afford that now, because you know the conditions under which we inherited the Water Authority. Against that backdrop, we said, as a compromise settlement, and the AG has now stepped away, but that we would hold and negotiate in future with you. But what we cannot do is let you build and pay you for 6 million gallons of water every day. Don't have the money. Full stop. And if we go there, then I'm going to have to start to ask some questions about how it gets so fast. You have now been, and Santia, you have been in discussions with one of the plants, and that is one for the West Coast, and the North as well.
Right.
So that when those discussions and negotiations are finished, we will be in a better position to be able to see how that plays into the deep injection wells that will take the water, stop it from going into the sea, and then collect that water and send it to a new reverse osmosis plant, which is a desal plant, to take out the nitrates and the salts. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is it. A double saving. Yeah.
And we pause, you want to update? Then we paused in the negotiations for the person who has the contract to do a study to be able to see what we can commit to. So we are awaiting those results before we can conclude the negotiations, correct?
And David said he'll get back to us shortly for the other areas we're looking at.
Right. The other one was on the South Coast, but this one, for your benefit, is what will deal with the West Coast down into St. Lucie. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Alex. Anything you want to add, DPM? Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams. Next person, thank you, Mrs. Williams.
Good night, Madam Prime Minister. Good night to everyone else. My name is Kimberly Agard. I'm a resident of Rockdundo.
Yes, Madam President.
I'm not Madam President tonight. Last St. James speak, I spoke about 2 issues. However, you would have addressed one of those issues at the meeting the said time. However, this time is not to raise an issue, but to say thank you to the Ministry of Transport and Works and also to the Barbados Water Authority for the work that has been done on the Rockdundo Main Road so far. I know that the residents of Rockdundo, we are very, very pleased. It is not completed, but however, we are grateful for the work that has been done so far. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that the Ministry of Public Works is happy to that. Thank you. And the officers who are here, who are accustomed being pummeled and not thanked. So thank you, officers. Let's go. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister, members of Parliament, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Glenn Taylor, and my wife, Carol Taylor, and we're resident in St. James North, Mullins, and we're here this evening to...
Mullins? You know,
Mullins,
Glenn.
St. James North.
So you're going to stand one side, and we will deal with you in the St. Peter Parish meeting. These meetings are not just about constituents, they're parish-based. So, but don't go home empty-handed. You'll deal with your issues and make sure that they're in the slew of things that we go forward. All right?
Thank you,
Prime. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. On the last occasion, I gotta fix the mic, I ain't touching it. I don't have... On the last occasion, the last St. James North... Thank you. Thanks. At the last St. James speak, I spoke about the lights on the Highway 2A, and nothing has been done. We still have no lights on Highway 2A. It's still pitch black and very dangerous. Since nothing was done, I'd like to make a suggestion. We have lots of sunlight, and I'm wondering if solar lights on the highway would work. I want lights, so I just want to know.
Thank you for that. I do recall the concern on the last occasion. We did create a list of all of the concerns from all of the parish speaks, not just from St. James alone, but everyone that we've done. That list has been shared, well, before we get to the list, after the residents complain or the MPs indicate that there are concerns, MTW will check the locations to determine what type of lighting is required. They will create a list, pass it on to Light and Power, and we've been meeting with them to try to knock off, obviously in terms of priority, the types of areas that may need to be urgently looked at and the other areas that are of concern. I know, for instance, my colleague next to me addressed some concerns as well in terms of areas where tourists would have been being robbed, for instance, and some of the residents as well. We tried to address those. Obviously, the highway is on that priority list, but we haven't gotten to it as yet. So I will definitely follow up with Light and Power to see how soon we're in a position to get that done, ma'am. All right.
Well, I will say thank you because it's an answer. But I had a similar one last time, so I hope that this time will be different. My second point is that
Can you come closer to the mic, Dan, please?
Kiss it. My second point is that I have now reached the age of retirement, and I am happy to be able to draw down on some of those funds I was paying since I was 19 years old. However, I am a little concerned that I still am paying a lot of money for water. I don't want to talk about my business, but Now, I pay a lot of money for water, and I'm wondering if as a pensioner, if I can get a reduced rate for my water. They had other pensioners, they may ask, but I get here now, and I would like to know, maybe some others will benefit from the answer. And I listen.
You would appreciate that I just finished talking about the hundreds of millions that we're going to have to spend on water. And I'd like to suggest, and I wish I could, but I'm not going to fool anybody. Barbados still has among the lowest water rates in the region, against the fact that it's a water scarce country. And if there is genuine hardship, this government created something that no other government had before, which is the Water and Garbage and Sewage Relief Board, similar to the Land Tax Relief Board, that deals with genuine hardship. So the short answer is it cannot be accommodated at this time, but we will continue to keep it under review. If the government's revenue situation or water authority's revenue situation improves significantly, then we can. But we are also carrying a hell of a lot of expenses for persons who are senior citizens and for persons who are very young in this country. And between the two, it means that the number of people who are working, which is reducing more and more, is carrying the load for everything. So I could tell you that, yes, I'll make you smile, but you and I both know, and you smiling with me because you know the answer already. Thank you.
But just to say, you said genuine hardship. Being a pensioner is a genuine hardship. Because when I was working, I had...
It's not a political decision for us to make. And the people who sit on the board will make a judgment based on the facts submitted, and we don't get involved, genuinely. Okay? The Land Tax Relief Board has been doing it for how many years, how many decades, Dale? About 40, 50 years? So Barbados has had this system in place, and it works well, and honestly, it benefits that really hardcore of people who cannot afford to pay. Now, what you are not saying as well is that this year, for the first time, the government made it possible that nobody will pay land tax in this country for properties valued $300,000 and under as residential properties. Now, that must mean something, both to those who will not pay anything at all and those who will see, therefore, a concomitant reduction because of the fact that we've moved from 150 or 175, whatever it was, to 300,000. So please,
yes, the
thank
land
you.
tax is fine, because I got my land tax bill today and I can see the difference. And I thank you for that.
And what you have gotten back in land tax is more than what you would have get back in water rates.
Well,
so thank you very much, ma'am.
I'd be happy to see
Thank
when
you
the
for the
water gets
opportunity
like
for
that.
me to make that point.
I'd be happy to see the water get like that. Thank you.
And let's get real. I want to say this to the country. The new wars of the 21st century are going to be over water and food. I want to repeat myself. The new wars in the 21st century will be over water and food. There is evidence showing that our soils are depleting globally at a rate that is reducing the yield of the crops that we plant. There is evidence globally, and I really wish that the Water Authority speaks to the country, so it is not the politicians speaking alone, about the groundwater crisis. Mr. Leslie, where are you? You're wearing the same color as Ms. Ford. Same orange. Let me see you. I can't see you. Could you come and speak about the groundwater crisis globally for 2 minutes? Because I think that the country needs to be educated. Because this is not something I'm pulling out of the sky. You have a groundwater crisis all over, and it is leading to serious climate migration. In other words, people are leaving the districts in which they have lived for centuries or decades and having to find and go and live elsewhere. Those who are farmers, in trouble. Mr. Leslie?
I'll take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, Prime Minister. Good evening, Cabinet Ministers. And good evening, audience. What the Prime Minister has said about the global water prices is correct. I don't know if you've been recognizing, but over the years, even here in Barbados, we've been getting reduced rainfall. And when we do get rainfall, it comes in sharp showers, and they are a lot shorter than they used to be in the past. Every year, the temperatures are going up, and it is affecting the evapotranspiration, you know, and the water that's available to now to us is a lot less. It's not only happening here in Barbados, but it's happening all across the world. And when we meet with our colleagues, one of the things that we are discussing is how we can more effectively utilize the freshwater resources that we have available to us, and how we can tap into other sources like the wastewater that we've been, like for instance, that we've been discharging to the sea. When I first joined the Barbados Water Authority in 1995, one of the things that we were looking at is how we can reuse that water, and I'm happy that we have reached a stage now where we're actually going to be looking at how we can reuse that and add it back to our aquifer. The aquifers here in Barbados are unconfined. When we say unconfined, it means that you don't have anything holding the water in. So once the rain falls, it's just a matter of time before that gets into the ground and gradually gets to the coastal environment. The way the land is sloping towards the west of the island, so it's gradually flowing towards the west of the island. And with the predictions of increase in rises in sea level and so forth, all along the west coast of the island, we're experiencing an increase in salinity of our water resources. So we have to be looking all the time at more effective ways to better utilize those resources and to be looking for the future, because obviously as things get warmer, people are going to take more frequent showers. When we look at making ourselves more resilient in terms of food that requires water, just today I was speaking to the Ministry of Agriculture about how we can, you know, facilitate them in terms of getting water to the various areas that they're working with. So as the Prime Minister said, yes, we have to look at how we more effectively utilize our water, and it's not only Barbados, as I said, it's other countries as well that are experiencing this similar phenomenon right across the world.
Thank you. And in fact, just as I spoke to you, I just went for the sake of showing you you can do your own research. The New York Times carried an article on the 29th of August of this year showing that 40% that American groundwater has been depleted severely in recent decades, with 40% of more than 85,000 wells hitting all-time lows just in the past 10 years. And the rainwater falling to replace the losses is obviously also affected. I can move from there and I can tell you about Africa and the Middle East, North Africa. 83% of the population do not have access to water. And when we hear about the terrorism and the coup d'etat, it is largely because there is no source of income, because people can't sustain life without water. And then we can go from there, and we can also look in South Asia, where 74% is exposed. So what I want to do, and part of the reason why we have these town hall meetings, is to begin to start to get things out there. And every month we've been talking about climate and water and transport, and the truth is that we're going to have to, as a country, change how we do certain things. When you did the Boarded Hall Road, I asked MTW to look at bike lanes so that people who want to use bicycles can do so more safely on the roads. Similarly, we are saying that there has to be water conservation, and the Water Authority knows that I'm waiting for them to roll out the package that allows households to get what? The tanks, the water conservation devices, and that if we have to help you with giving you and lending you the money to get it for your household, and then you can decide how you pay back over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years by paying back the water authority the additional money that you have agreed you will pay back. Why? Because if you can replace your toilet now, the average toilet, Charles, flushes how many gallons in a flush? 5 to 6. And then the water saving toilets are how much? About 2 to 3. So you can save half to 2/3 of the water that you use on every flush. But what does that mean, Diane? That you will pay less money. Because if you're flushing and you're using less water, it means that your bill will record less usage. And that is why I am anxious for the Water Authority to roll out the package, because it also creates jobs for plumbers and for other people across the country, while at the same time, the cost of it is being borne by the entire country, because the households who can't afford to do it, who are on welfare, Kirk Humphrey and them, will deal and certify that they can't do it, and we should do it for them. Just as we've done with the hurricane straps. Those houses that are below the poverty line, we haven't asked them for a cent for the hurricane straps. Similarly with these conservation measures. So I'm waiting for the Water Authority to announce the project. I had spoken to it some time ago, but what happened? COVID. And when COVID happened, what did we do? Stop the Water Authority from disconnecting anybody. We have gone back to the situation where people have to pay their bills. And if there is too hard, or that there are reasons, come forward to the Water Authority. There is the relief board. And if they can't do it, then, and you don't come, I can't help you because you've not made a case for yourself. Okay? Who's next? Thank you.
Madam Prime Minister, other ministers, good night. My name is Anderson Hoda from St. James South. Let me first begin by saying that last time we were here, we had some issues which were raised, like drainage and cleaning. And I want to thank the different ministries for coming on board and cleaning the area and debushing some of the areas. But I have some other issues which I want to raise tonight. And mainly one, lightning in the area. You very well know where we live in Crystal Husband Sites. It's the area for persons who go to university, and also to the Cabinet Institute.
For some reason, I understand you're getting a little muffled. I'm not sure if it's you or the mic. So which areas
I can probably start
again?
first again.
Which areas for street lights? Which areas?
University, one state area, and over by the Met Institute, where students pass there regularly and persons go walking on mornings and at night. And if you leave by university where they have the 3Ws into one state, it is pitch dark. If you leave by straight Husbands Road, coming across from Heinz Hill, straight to the Institute Husbands.
So none of them ever had lights before? Is it a case of lights blown?
None.
Okay.
None.
Santia, you'll take care of that? Okay.
And then COVID is off of us.
Well, what you all can do is to just help by getting the street pole numbers. And once we get the street pole numbers, that will make it easier for Public Works to act.
And let me just say
and that applies earlier to Diane. Well, Diane, yours is a little more difficult because you asked about the highway. So Public Works will have to do the highway themselves.
And as I mentioned to the Met Institute as well, by Queen's Cottage School.
I have
that
both.
area. Okay.
I have both, and both relate to areas where schools, educational institutions are. So it's not an issue, it's just to get it done. Okay?
The issue is drainage. When we get heavy rains in St. James South, there's one area which is called Warren's Park North. And the well in that area needs to be cleaned. The water leaves Warren's Park North and flow all the way down to Simpson Motors roundabout. And there are 4 or 5 houses in that area that get flooded out every time that you have heavy rains in that area. And we need someone to come and look at that area as well too. I can speak to some person later when we finish. I'll see which area, which direction it is, so we can get those residents get started as soon as possible. Because the complaint every time the rain is falling. The other areas we want to talk about is the bushing.
Mr. Yerwood is here. Come, Mr. Yerwood.
the bushing in one side area and wells. There were two wells were about 25 feet apart of each other in one side, and they were repaired. But it took at least 6 months before anybody came and looked at them and repaired them. Thank God that they're fully repaired now. But there's one on the one side main road, which is the back of 6th Avenue, one side, that has been broken for the last 6 months or so. And the children from Western School pass that road every morning and every evening. As you very well know, over the last few years, persons drop into wells. We had one recently over there by the Mexico. Gentleman walk in the morning, and what happened? That well has been broken for the last 5 months, just at the back of one side, 6th Avenue. And nobody has come to look at it. It's very dangerous. You see children walking there, and children at Western School be years of 4 to 10. And they ain't think it easy happen.
Barbadians should be encouraged that where they know there are wells with covers that are broken, to be able to submit the information to the Ministry of Public Works so that they can know, because you're talking, how many wells we have nationally, Charles? How much? He said in excess of 6,000 wells across the island. So the best way to do it is to make many hands make light work. And if you know of wells in your area, in the same way that you bring to our attention about the street
Madam
lights.
Prime Minister, the ones that were repaired recently were notified 6 months ago.
Hold on.
The one that got repaired 2 weeks ago.
There are two issues, Andy, please. The first thing we need to do is to know. Then the second thing is that Public Works will prioritize and do. Because if at the end of the day there are 1,000, then it will take time to do 1,000. If there are 100, it will take much less time. So what I want to do is first and foremost to encourage Barbadians. This government took a decision, 4 years ago, to be able to do the same thing with the National Housing Corporation estates, and that we have literally been going around fixing two things. I think people forget what we have had to deal with. How many houses have had to be rewired and the electricity dealt with in the housing estates, Sandra?
We had something like 28 blocks that were rewired.
28 blocks by you, but that's just Haynesville. Adrian, Silver Hill, all Gall Hill, Pine, Parkinson, all of those, and we have spent millions of dollars just Redmond Village rewiring properties. At the same time, the NHC has also had to go in and do over covers on the sewage and the wells. Okay? So I'm not telling you that it's not a valid issue. What I'm telling you is that what we inherited is so steep a curve of lack of maintenance that with the best will in the world, it can't be done all at once. And we are dealing with them systematically, but I am saying the first task, Charles, is what? You must know where the wells are and which one. If you help us by taking a picture of it, it means then that he can determine which is a priority and which is not. Now, the ministry is supposed to be setting up a drone unit to be able to allow us to do more effective monitoring. And once that is done, it will help as well. But in the interim, I'm asking people, if you know of problems or you have a well, in fact, I'm going to ask Public Works to just have a dedicated email or WhatsApp number that people can send it to you to make your life a little easier as well. Because you do your promotion on both social media and public media. So you can put out and start to collect the information.
I have a picture. I'll give you a picture when I finish tonight. Finally, I have a picture of the well. I can give it to him when I finish.
No problem.
Finally, the bushing in one state area. Between Avenue 6 to 10.
My dear,
there's a lot
the
of
bushing will be covered when the legislation comes from the AG. You heard me make the point. He was just whispering to me that the draftsperson who was finishing it up was on sick leave, but she's back out now, correct? And therefore, I anticipate that it shall be before the country very soon. And why? How many of those lots there may be owned by government?
I'm not talking private lots.
Anybody could tell me.
Private lots or individual.
And with ownership comes responsibility. So that if we own a lot, we have to keep it clean. And the government will put in place, as I said, the legislation to be able to ask homeowners to keep it clean. If not, we will have to clean it, and then you pay for the cleaning plus a penalty. Because that's the only way we're going to change behavior in the country. In the same way that we don't want people to litter, we don't want people to have overgrown lots, because overgrown lots means public health and public safety nuisances. Okay? So if you know some of them homeowners, if I were you, I would go and talk with them. Thank you. Mr. Yerwood, you want to answer him on the drainage? Because I don't, and the wells, please? If you just stand up, thanks.
Good night, all. At table and persons in the audience. The issues of
No, you use this.
Good night, all. The Drainage Division, as part of Transport Work and Water Resources, responsible for wells and drainage works. And we have a number of persons who do complain, but I think we need to have a greater communication with the public on, as Prime Minister said, to everyone who knows where to call. MIS is we've rolling out, just about MIS is rolling out a complaints app, and we've in that final stage of going public with it. It's not only for drainage, for other departments, but we are on board on the pilot project. But speaking specifically to the complainant, we are been doing work particularly in the wider St. James South, Husbands, Wanstead, Oxnards. You complain, and we have others on list to be done. But we have contractors who are doing work. They're not doing as many as we'd like to have them done. And we're looking to invite other contractors who have not tendered to come on board and help us with it. So if anyone know, and I use this opportunity, if anyone of contractors who don't work for the ministry, then call the ministry, the department at 536-0095 to be on the list to offer you work in the contract. There's monies provided, but the rate at which the contractors are working, we will not be able to use all that money this year.
What you're effectively saying is that there's a shortage of well cleaners, but you're making the call yet again for people who are interested and who know how to clean wells or who want to learn seriously how to do it, to come forward to the ministry. I don't remember the number, but I'm sure the ministry will publicize it again. Okay? Next, please, Mr. Nesfield.
Good night, all. Prime Minister, welcome back here, and members of your cabinet. I want to have a little preamble first before we get into the actual stuff.
Mr. Nesfield, I may know your name, but state it for the record, please.
Greater Nesfield, West Terrace, St. James, Barbados. About 22 years ago, I think the government embarked on a concrete roads program. It was influenced by the road at Redmond's Drive. That's, for those people who don't know, Redmond's Drive is the road above what used to be motor services that leads down the road here. And that road was done in 1962. And there has been no need to go back there at all. I believe that the time has come for the government to have another look at the concrete roads program, even though it was restricted at that time to tenantries. When a Prime Minister, you go licking. You got quite a few in your constituency here, about 4 or 5. And nobody has complained since then about the quality of the road there. The only complaint that was done was against me, because some people argued that I was doing too many concrete roads and they may have to lay off the road patchers. Notwithstanding that, to be specific, that road that leads from the Methodist Church to St. Thomas. It is widely used by locals and tourists, and it leads to our measure.
You mean Seaview Road? Seaview?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It leads to our major tourist attraction. It's in a bad state. When vehicles go on that road, they sing as though they're in the church choir. This is a fact. I believe that a proper cost-benefit analysis should be undertaken to determine what roads we can.
It's already been done, and I'm just letting you enunciate so that the Deputy Prime Minister can give you chapter and verse about what has been done and what she's about to do.
So I can proceed.
So you want to defer to her then?
No, not yet.
Okay, go ahead then.
But as I said, the cost-benefit analysis, I don't expect that the major roads will be, you will want to do the major roads in concrete. But those subsidiary roads, you can have a look at that there and see how many of them can be done. There's one. There's another road in St. James, because I'm very much a St. James man all over, in Orange Hill. The road that leads from, the section that leads from the Learning Center to the Apeshill development. The road has been in a bad shape for a long time. But in recent times, MTW cut the rock just before you get to Apeshill. They carry away the rubble, but they left the road raw. And it is virtually, they have not gone back there since they removed the rock. And I believe there are two matters that need to be addressed. I will hear you now.
Thank you so much for those 2 points. As it relates to the concrete roads, you are correct that the roads that were built, I think, in the 1960s, that those roads have still held up in terms of the concrete roads that were done. About a year ago, the team at MTW and myself went to Texas to view a technology that's called roller compacted concrete. And it really is a new technology in what we understand to be concrete roads. It is faster in terms of its application. It is more durable in terms of how long it lasts as well compared to the asphalt roads. And the ministry determined that this was a methodology that we ought to use going forward. So we have started the process of identifying some of the roads that take a lot of heavy traffic, as well as some of the roads in the residential communities as well, to be able to apply the roller compacted concrete. Cabinet recently approved the proposal for the start of 2 roads. The intention is that we will do more, but we're starting with those. As you can appreciate, it will require coordination, just as with asphalt roads, with the utilities, to make sure that we are able to change out mains and to put down MPC pipes in those areas while we are doing the rehabilitation of those roads as well. So just to assure you that that process has started, we're hopeful that we can start the first 2 RCC roads on I think it's the 2nd of October. But the paperwork is being done in terms of, in another week, in terms of signing off on the contracts and getting everything in place. So you will see some activity in relation to what we call RCC roads, or roller compacted concrete roads, coming up.
That will be out, because I will not want my grandchildren to be out here hearing the RPB Calypso much longer. Well, these roads here and ducking from this road and pothole here and whatnot. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nesfield. I think that you heard, therefore, that you were already, the government is already down the road, down the wicket on these matters. And the cost-benefit analysis were done. In some instances, there will be increased costs, as Antia said, but you also reminded us that the reef road is there now since 1962 and is pretty much still intact. And you told us about the short roads in my constituency that were done previously by urban, those are still intact. So there are some that will suit themselves to it, and there's some, because of the difficulty with the water mains, that may not necessarily be ideal. So they're working on it. Okay? Next one. You may want Mr. Nesfield to come across here, because this is the line of people talking. Thanks.
Good night, Minister and Prime Minister, members of the Cabinet, and other persons. In your opening remarks, you mentioned...
Brooks, just give your name and address. I know your name, but the others don't. Thank you.
Selvin Brooks, Fire Park Road. In your opening remarks, Madam Prime Minister, you made the point that at this meeting, there were far more people, or there's an increase. And the reason why persons come to these Parish Speaks, because of the results and the oriented of what happens at this meeting. A colleague of mine was able to praise the Water Authority for some work that they did in St. James. So I am hoping that the questions that I am asked, and my colleagues behind me will be able to answer some of the questions, and which a number of persons will ask me to bring to this meeting. Last year in this very room, you were able, residents from Fire Park, Halls Village, and the surrounding areas were very pleased to hear that the Fire Park Road would have been rehabilitated. You also indicated at that meeting that the Water Authority would have had to replace the mains. Some 3 weeks ago, we saw some activity from the Water Authority in the Fire Park. Madam, I have a number of questions which I sincerely hope Mr. Leslie and Mr. Eiffel, who is sitting behind me, might be able to answer. And I took the copious notes of writing them down, because they are not questions that I don't think that we cannot ask tonight. What is the scope of this work? 3 weeks ago, some equipment turned up, and may I add, for the last 4 days, nothing has happened. Now, I can speak with some level of authority that because I live on Fire Park Main Road. It's not what some person have told me. What is the scope of this work? How long is it estimated to take? What are the anticipated measures for the inconvenience that is going to be caused? Because we, the persons in Fire Park, want the road to be fixed. Okay? There's no doubt in terms of what the government is doing to improve the lot of the roads. We want it. But there's certain pertinent questions that has to be asked. And how long is this going to take? And what are the aspects of the rehabilitation process after the the pipes have been put in? Madam, this road is a very heavily used road, and even though the tour sign has maybe prevented some traffic from passing along that road, but Fire Park Road deserves, and the residents who are surrounding in that area, I think the Water Authority needs to tell us answers to these questions. And I anticipate, Madam, the success story that I will be able to come next year and tell all and sundry in St. James that Fire Park Road has finally been fixed. So I have asked these questions. I do not know if Mr. Leslie or if you're going to direct the questions to, or maybe you can answer them. But I really would like to have some answers on
I think you would know that those detailed questions can only be answered by the technicians.
And that
if
is
they
why,
can't give
and
you
that's
an
why I
answer
asked Mr.
tonight,
Leslie and those persons.
they will also write you and give you the answer. So who's here from Water Authority who can speak, please? Mr. Leslie, is it you? You want to use this?
Good night, and thank you for those questions. The Barbados Water Authority, we are going to be replacing we started to replace the main from the roundabout when you come from Bagatelle, going down to Hoyts Village. We are replacing the main from there all the way over to the Met Office. The entire job is supposed to take us about 3 months to come from the beginning to the completion. We started to do some trenching from just after, I can't remember the name of the gap, but just before Park Terrace, Coral Glade, right? And we encountered a little bit of difficulty there with one of the residents. There's a resident there who has a fence right into the road. And when we got there, we had to stop using the trencher there and we were using the excavator for that particular section. We started to use the trencher again from there and we were going across for as much as we can. There are some, I don't know if you've examined the entire road, but there's some utility lines that have grown into some trees as you go across that road. And we've made contact with the Barbados Light and Power to assist us there because we don't want the equipment as it is trenching going past just before where you live to encounter those electrical lines going over there. So we're using a combination of a trencher that we have there and excavator. We just crossed the road that would take you up into Park Great House. We just use the excavator across the entrance to that road. And as we come across the other entrances, like Park Heights and so forth, we will be using a combination of the excavator and the trencher to go across those roads. So the entire job is supposed to be taking us about 3 months. It will mean the installation of the new main. We have to then pressure test that main, chlorinate it, and once that is done, we're going to be doing the transfer of the services. Well, not the services, the laterals, which would be like Prior Park Terrace, Prior Park Stage 2, Hoyts Village, all those will be transferred then onto the new main. We've been in contact with the Ministry of Public Works, and the idea is that as soon as we are finished, they're going to come in immediately after us and do the milling and reinstatement of that road. So there's a coordination between the two ministries in terms of being able to get that job completed as soon as possible.
I'm glad to hear, at least from the Water Authority, the schedule, they're saying they're 3 months. I hope that we were able to hold them to it because as we come closer to the November and December period, one will not want to have undue inconvenience. But 2 other questions I want to ask. Some years ago, there was a proposal to take out some of the dangerous corners. I do not know if the Minister of Public Works will be able to address this. While they are putting down the water mains, is it anticipated that the 2 dangerous corners, which very often I have to repair my fencing because people run off the road, are those corners going to be addressed in this rehabilitation of the road between the Met Office and the roundabout at Bagatelle? And the last question is, I've heard Mr. Nesfield speak about the advantages of doing concrete road. Maybe the possibility, let us try Park Road, Madam Prime Minister, and see if they can use that as a medium. Because that road has had some challenges over the years. And I've been living there now for just over 50 years. So I can speak with some level of authority of the inconvenience that we would have had along Park Road. So I listen to hear if the bends are going to be taken out at the same time, because the Light and Power had moved their poles to accommodate the straightening of the bends. And these are the bends close to the mile trees.
I think you will have to have a site visit on that, because to ask the minister whether that will be done without her knowing the bends would be to do like the Calypsonian, was it King Lear, who said, show me the corner where you walk and the tailor will make the suit. Well, she can't do that yet. So she can arrange to have the site visit, and she will tell you whether that is in the scope of works or not at this point, or whether it has to go into a future financial year. Is that fair, please?
That is reasonable. And the last question, I am not anticipating that you will be able to answer this question. What is the usage? Some years ago, the MTW would have put the measuring device across the road to measure the amount of the traffic that traverses here. Park has, especially of late, a lot of younger people who, from Mr. Simmons' constituency, who traverse along that road. So I think they also have to look at some consideration when we speak about rehabilitation of the road, to regulate the vehicles. Only 2 weeks ago, a container truck at exorbitant speed would have pulled down wires and whatever. So I can tell you with some authority that very often that is the case because of the speed. So we need to have some level of regulation, because if the road is going to be rehabilitated, it means that person will tend to drive a little faster than they're driving now on the bad road. So maybe some consideration should be given as to how we can regulate that traffic.
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Brooks. I think that therefore the site visit will look at the bends, it will look at the utility poles, and it will look at the necessity for any traffic or speed restrictions. Okay? Thank you very much. Can we have the next person, please? Oh, hold on. DPM wants to comment.
All right. I just wanted to follow on from what the individual was asking just now, and to just state for those who may not be aware, in many cases we've identified roads, whether we've identified roads in the Complant project, under the CAF program, on the residential roads. When we go into the communities, and I'll give you the example of Rock Dundo, for instance. We went into Rock Dundo, it was clear how many kilometers of road was to be done, what accommodation works were to be done, how much work the utilities were to do in terms of changing out the mains, as well as the MPC, for instance, laying down the pipes. But then we encountered issues with Water Authority where we had to increase the size of the main, because we were getting a number of bursts along the way. We also recognized that the side roads were having some challenges as well, because once you had more pressure coming down the main road, you had obviously additional breaks both in the side roads and also further down. We did a walkthrough of Rock Dundo and realized that there was also drainage issues that perhaps had not been in the initial scope. But by listening to some of the residents, we recognized that we would have to do additional drainage wells, especially in the area of the well, the bridge. Now, I say all that to say that while initially it starts out where the scope is for rehabilitation of a road, as the process gets going and sometimes we're engaging with the utilities, we encounter things that sometimes could not have been anticipated. And therefore, to your question about accommodation works and are we going to do the bends and those types of things, often in the process, those things are worked out as well. So I give you the assurance that we will do a site visit to the location in Prior Park and address a number of the issues that you have identified. But it's not a straightforward process. Sometimes when we start, even though we would like everything to have been captured, oftentimes it is not captured at the outset. The last thing I would say is that we also recognize that within the budget, there's often not an inclusion for street lighting or the improvement of street lighting in an area. But we've also taken a position now that any of the new roads that we have done under any of the programs, we're engaging with Light and Power to get them to prioritize those roads. So if you take all of the IDB roads, Carmichael, the one going to 6 roads, we've simply said you can't improve the drainage and the road and then not improve the lighting. Now, I think Barbadians need to appreciate that all of this level of improvement comes at a cost, because everybody would like everything put in all the same time. And sometimes with the resources that we have, we can't get to every single location and do all the improvements one time. So I just wanted to put that on the table, because I think, sometimes we want everything, but we don't appreciate that there are a lot of variables that often arise in the course of getting the roads done. Nobody can want these roads done more than me, because these MPs in St. James are constantly blowing up my phone about lighting and roads and the conditions. So believe me, we are hearing you, but as I said, we need to take it step by step in terms of making the improvements over time.
Thank you, DPM, and thank you for clarifying that once everything comes in, it still has to be subject to a prioritization list. Because I wish, as I keep saying, that we could wiggle our nose and do everything all at once. But that is not realistic, nor is it likely to happen. And we have a long list of things that we're cleaning up. Who's next, please?
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister and members of your cabinet. My name is Maureen Denny. I am living in the north of St. James. I have an extremely vexing situation next to my home that has been going on for some years. There is a lot. It is vacant. It is about 1.5 acres of land. It has partially I can't say they're buildings, partial structures of concrete. I am now neighbors to rats, mice, mosquitoes, centipedes, and African snails. I have been living with this problem for over a decade. The property is not owned by Barbadians living in Barbados. It is owned by UK residents, a corporation, because it's not a one-house spot piece of land. I cannot enjoy my property because of the issues of the rodents and the mosquitoes. I have recently been in talks with my representative to find out what do I need to do to be able to live in my property in peace. Now, I am being advised that the lot is private property, which I know it is, and that you cannot go on private property and clear it because then you are breaking the law. Madam Prime Minister, I have had to break the law for 10 years because I didn't know that trying to protect myself was breaking the law, but now I know. I have spent thousands of dollars over the last 10 years. Up to last week, I had to buy a big bag of snail bait. When does a person's private property supersede a health environment? It doesn't. So I have no recourse. And the reason why this is so personal, Madam Prime Minister, I'll tell you why. In 2016, I collapsed all of a sudden. I was unconscious and I was rushed to QEH. When I woke up, I was in intensive care. I don't even know how I got there. I have had memory loss and you know, when they finally found out what was wrong with me, I had contracted a virus, not dengue, not chikungunya, a virus called hand-to virus. Do you know what causes hand-to virus? When you inhale the droppings or the dust from rats. They took my samples up to CDC in the United States because I was in a coma and they didn't know what was wrong with me. Madam Prime Minister, I am angry. I don't have time to get another virus. I don't have time to wait for the legislation. This is personal.
Madam, it's for people like you that the legislation is being done. But in the interim, there are also mechanisms that allow you to deal with structures that are a public nuisance. I think only last week or week before, Mr. Anthony Headley was in the newspapers making the point that they have been given the resources to go around the country and to pick up not just derelict vehicles, but also to take down derelict structures. Now, if what you have described to me is next to you and has been like that for some time, that must be a derelict structure.
Madam,
and let me just finish. And therefore, the Minister of Environment is here, and I would ask him to please do a site visit with Mr. Headley, because there is a process. And it is at this point I will pass to the AG, because even under the current law, they can still deal with derelict structures and derelict vehicles. What we are trying to do is to be able to broaden the scope so that even before it gets to derelict, that we can deal with bush at 3 feet and 2 feet and 4 feet, because you can't get to 6 foot bush if you clean it at 2 foot. So that what we are saying, and this is the fairness, you heard the lady get here, Ms. Ford, asking for ease on water bills. But if the government has to be the only one going around cleaning bush on people's property, when the property is sold, the government don't get no money. We don't have a capital gains tax in this country. We barely have a transfer tax. So that what I'm saying to you is that the government has taken a decision that ownership carries responsibility. Now, what happened to you is a travesty and should not happen. And I can give you other stories where it may not be public health, but where a person was robbed or where a person was knocked down because the person was hiding in either a derelict building or in 6-foot and 8-foot bush. Up to 2 weeks ago, my officers, close protection officers, would tell you that every car ride, I am literally on the phone getting either my assistant or calling the Minister of Environment, calling NCC, and it is largely for personal, private properties. And that's why I'm saying that we have to have a conversation in this country. And given that the conversation is not getting where it needs to get, the legislation must come. Because people must realize that the Constitution gives you rights, but it also imposes responsibilities. And regrettably, because it doesn't say so in those explicit terms, it is implied through the Health Services Act and the different other pieces of legislation that impose on you a burden to behave in a certain way. Now, I have come into public life, and for 30 years, I tired hearing stories like yours. And therefore, we have said enough is enough. And that what must happen, some of the same ash workers that gone home, hire them and clean your property. Because if the government has to do it for you, you're going to pay what we paid, and then you're going to pay a penalty for the fact that we had to cover administrative costs and advertising costs to do what you should be doing on your own property yourself. We come up in a Barbados where people didn't even used to have to go and clean the gutters because people would clean the gutters in front of their house. And I ask this country, I am begging that we know better. And I'm sorry that you have had to endure that kind of serious threat to your well-being, and I don't want it to happen to others. That is why we're doing the legislation. But in the interim, the legislation already covers derelict properties. The legislation that we're doing is to cover bush and to cover aesthetics and obligations, because if you're going to get the benefit of a higher commercial value in Speightstown, Holetown, Bridgetown, Oistins, well, then you have a duty to at least keep the front of your property clean and painted. And that legislation will also speak to that, because you get the benefit, and what happens when you get the benefit? You must carry also what? The burden. So, Adrian, could you please speak to Miss Denny? Miss or Mrs.?
Miss.
Miss Denny, and he's coming to you right now, and I can guarantee you that before Friday, he is going to be with you, with Mr. Headley, or the other officers, and that the notices, because notices have to go up first, don't they, AG? And once those notices have gone up and nobody comes forward, then they have the right to do what they have to do, and then the cost of doing it is put on the land tax bill. So that what we are proposing is not a deviation from what previous governments have done in the past. It is just that we're saying it is not sufficient to deal with only derelict properties. Let me deal with some bush now too. Because bush, when left, lobster alive, right there on the beach. Anybody, and you had 6 foot of bush, and I asked, what is going on? You cannot have 6 foot of bush on any beach in Barbados, because what happens when sun gone at sunset? Somebody can hide in that bush and jump out on somebody. And I'm asking the country, please, I can always be here, but it's in the country's interest to change our behavior. We know what it is for cleanliness. Bajans are some of the cleanest people in the world. Bajans don't believe that you have to bathe less than twice a day. And if you catch some, you can do 3 and 4 times. But that same cleanliness and hygiene has to attach itself to property and not just human beings. So thank you for raising it. And I ask the AG now to address the legal side of it for us. Thank you.
Madam Prime Minister, I have yesterday sent a video of the entire 1.5 acres that he can share with whoever needs to see what is on that lot.
Ms. Denny, I'm not going to add too much, but let me assure you, first of all, that the idea that you are not able to enter onto your neighbor's property to bring relief to yourself in terms of cutting down bush and putting down bait and so on is wrong, okay? So the person who said to you that you are committing an illegal act, that isn't accurate, because the law always recognizes that you have an opportunity for what is called self-help. So if a person is committing a wrong to you, and that is in fact a wrong, then you have the opportunity to do self-help and deal with it yourself. And no court is going to entertain somebody who says, you trespassed on my land to cut bush or to put down snail bait. So you can do what you have to do. But let me say that there's an obvious failing in the system. Since 1969, we've had health services nuisance regulations. Since 1969, that was a different Barbados then, but obviously, Prime Minister, we have regressed and gone back to that place. And the health services regulations impose an obligation on property owners to keep their property free of anything that would harbor vermin, mosquitoes, anything of the sort. In fact, the regulations speak specifically to rodents. So there's adequate provision in the law to deal with this, and I think my friend Adrian will discuss this with you. And the government is able to serve a notice requiring the owner to effect the remedy. If they do not, then the ministry will do it and impose the cost on the owner. So there's more than adequate remedy available to you in law. I regret that you had to come to this place to be made aware of it. But for all of you who have this situation, there is legislation that already deals with it. If the adjoining lot, if any lot in the neighborhood is a harborage for rats, vermin, whether it's old cars, old tots, old boxes, whatever it is, there's provision to have that dealt with in the law since 1969.
And finally, before I go, let me thank the headmaster of this school, because without his assistance this evening, I would not even be able to come into this meeting. Madam Prime Minister, I don't even know when it's time to go anywhere in Barbados, public places and private, and I have to leave home. You'd never know what I'm going to find. And tonight's example was another one where I didn't know if there was a ramp. I didn't know if the incline was good, and had not for the headmaster coming out to me and saying, let me see, because he's new to the school. And he assisted me. Madam Prime Minister, I am a no-class citizen in your country. That's how I feel. Every time I have to leave my home to go anywhere. And remember, I am an independent woman. I can drive. But you know why I can't drive? Because when I get to where I'm going, somebody got to jump out the car, go in this place, tell them, where's the ramp? Madam Prime Minister, I know every warehouse back door, because I just normally have to go where they're unloading the cargo to get in to do my business. And when I don't do that, let me give you an example, madam, why I can tell you I feel like a second-class citizen. You hear all the talk about the ID card. You know how I got my ID card, Madam Prime Minister? In the road in Speightstown. You know why? There's no building that I can get in. There's even a parking spot for me when I get my car. I am a third-class citizen in this country, me and all the other disabled people. And I am tired of it, but I ain't giving up the fight.
And neither are we.
I ain't giving up the fight.
And neither are we. So let me start. This gentleman to my right, who I suspect may be your member of parliament, is the person who for how many months? 16 months, has gone from St. Lucie to St. Philip, from St. John to St. James, with a report that is now, Minister Humphrey, before you, and it was approved last week. The report for a new deal for the differently able and disabled. I spoke to it 2 weeks ago when we started the debate on the lease for the property to the ministry, to the Barbados Autism Association. Secondly, we have asked Public Works to do a costing for what it will take to make sure that all sidewalks in the town centers are accessible, and thereafter government buildings, which is one of the recommendations coming from his report. Thirdly, I heard Minister Strawn in what perhaps is one of the most emotional speeches that I have ever heard in Parliament from any parliamentarian in over 30 years, make the case, but also not just for us to do better by people who are differently able or disabled, but also to make the point that the Ministry of Finance has been giving people tax concessions and waivers for vehicles to improve accessibility, so that if people need to be able to modify their vehicles to accommodate the wheelchair or to be able to drive with the wheelchair, the Ministry of Finance has been helping. So I would like you to know that it's not quite the case that you are saying, because the government has been putting policies in place. Am I satisfied that we've gone far enough? No. And that is why when the cabinet was sworn in January of last year, I made the point that Mr. Hinkson would be chairing this commission. But secondly, I made the point that the country also has to change its behavior. Because more often than not, when you go and you hear other people tell you, I go to park in a parking space reserved for me as handicapped. And what happens? That when you see somebody else in there, that they are able-bodied and just gone there because it's the closest thing to the entrance. It is wrong. And the behavior has to change all across. Now we are 50, how many years as a country? 57? And we therefore have to move forward in a way that sees you, feels you, and hears you. And that is the basis upon which this government started this term. And that is why the cabinet approved the policy framework last week. And that is why we had Eddie and the commission going from St. Lucie back to St. Philip, St. James to St. John. And I'm saying to you that with the best will in the world, we are going to have to undertake in a phased manner what we did not do in 57 years, we would like to do in the next 3 to 5 years. But it takes planning, time, and financing. Is it a priority for us? Yes, it is. And that's why we've asked Public Works and we've asked the Ministry of People Empowerment to ensure that the reports are carried before Parliament. But as Glenn Clark once said, legislation does not shut down a culture. So that when that is all said and done, the same culture that we need people to change with the lots that overgrown, that cause you to be in a wheelchair in the first place, has to change. The same culture that causes you not to see a handicapped place and leave it. Last week in New York, I wanted to go to the bathroom real bad, and I had the only place that was open, asked my PS, was a handicapped bathroom, and I refused to go in it because I'm not doing it. And I stood up there for another 10 minutes and waited until the bathroom that was for me was made available. Now that's the behavior we want from every child to every senior citizen in this country. And if it's going to take, regrettably, you're having to pour your heart out to the country to start to change behavior, I can only thank you, Ms. Denny, but I also say to the others that the report that is coming and has come from Mr. Hinkson and his commission is one that is not just for governments, but for individuals to help change their behavior. I cannot imagine the pain and suffering that you have had to endure because of the virus. And the truth is, there are viruses that happen all the time. But when you have that kind of circumstances, as close as you live to it, and for the doctors to tell you this is what it is, it has to be heart-wrenching. And therefore, our heart goes out to you, but I give you the assurance that this country will have a better deal for persons who are differently able and disabled, and this country must also have a commitment to water conservation, to cleanliness and hygiene, and to the things that make us a better country. I wasn't going to talk about productivity tonight, but I'm going to soon talk about it. Because unless we increase our productivity across the board, from the private to the public sector, is sometimes I feel that we don't want to go and get further and better. And I'm saying to us now that it doesn't lie in the hands of government alone. It lies in the hands of each and every citizen. And that is why in the Republic Charter of Barbados, we say that it is not only the right that you enjoy by being a Barbadian, but it is also the responsibilities. And I leave you on this point. The same bush, if not cut, becomes a nuisance and a threat. The same house or school, if not maintained, becomes what? A nuisance or a threat. Why do we believe that the nation state is any different? If the nation state is not taken care of, not just by government, but by every citizen, or the majority at least, then the nation state starts to fall. And then you will start to hear people say, man, years ago, man, before, we used to do X, we used to do Y, we used to clean the gutters, we used to do this. We have to teach our children, we have to insist our young people and adults, and we have to have those senior citizens who can, and those who can't, share and nurture and encourage others. But this country can only move to the next level when everybody is prepared to lift some heavy weight, and when some difficult decisions would be taken. You think I felt good telling Diane that she can't get the water rates reduced? But there's nothing better that I would love to do for her. But I know in my heart of hearts, in a water-scarce country, Mr. Leslie, could I be reducing water rates that are among the lowest in the Caribbean? At a time when you have problems and you need to augment water and replace 130 years of distribution systems? It would be reckless and irresponsible. Just like the fact that the biggest problem at the National Housing Corporation is that it has been bankrupt for 15 years. Why? Mr. Nestle, where you and the rest are? Because if you gave away all of your assets and stopped taking rent and revenue, and you still have the obligation of maintenance, sewage, wells, electrical rewiring, millions of dollars, the ones that we want to convey to people, we can't convey the ones that don't have proper ring beam properly. This country has a reckoning to be able to ensure that we can get these things right. And I am not saying this because I have a desire to speak truth, to offend people. I'm speaking truth because that's the only way we're going to change it. And if we don't change it, then regrettably more people will end up having to befall the fate that you befell and should never have had to. More people will end up with other difficulties. So I thank you, Ms. Denny. You have the video, but nothing is like physical presence. I have confidence that Minister Ford will come and visit you, and he will make sure that the regulatory officials who are empowered at law to deal with nuisances as adumbrated by the Attorney General in the Health Service regulations, that they can act with a partially constructed building that is derelict, in a way that if it was only bush, we would be more challenged. So you actually have an advantage. Now, I'm not going to be the one to tell you that your lawyer may have to advise you whether you have a tortious claim or not. But if I were you, I would find out. Because as you just heard from the AG, if you are doing something to be able to promote self-help, to avert a nuisance, it means that the nuisance had to be caused in the first place. And the question, therefore, is whose liability is it and who should be paying your medical bills? Thank you. Who's next?
Good night, Madam Prime Minister and panel. My name is Pamela Haynes. I live in Mount Standfast, St. James, but I am here on behalf of the Barbados Association for Supported Employment which is situated in Greenwich, St. James. Our acronym is BASE, Barbados Association for Support and Employment. And perhaps it's wonderful that I'm coming on the heels of Ms. Denny, because she speaks about the physically challenged. I am here talking about BASE, which is an organization that is standing up for the rights of the intellectually and developmentally disabled. We have been in Greenwich, St. James for 13 years. The organization has existed for 13 years. We've been since 2010, so it is 13 years. A lot of our youngsters are individuals that are more than capable of doing things. They just need supervision and to be told to stay on task. Minister Hingston can attest to the wonderful things that we make. We make natural juices, we make cassava pone, and all of those wonderful things. Prior to COVID, we used to sell at St. James Parish Church on a Wednesday. As a matter of fact, St. James Parish Church has been instrumental in giving us the property, letting us use it rent-free, but we have to pay our utilities. We're thankful for the government, for giving us a subvention. About a year and a half ago, we were asked to present our financials and everything. We are up to date with all of our paperwork because we get our subvention through the National Disabilities Unit and People Empowerment. We were told that we were being considered for an increase. That was about a year and a half ago. Nothing has happened. So we're asking if there's a possibility to get that increase. We have 10 young people who come to our program. Many of them have to take buses. When the fares went up, we wrote the same ministry to find out if we could get bus passes. A couple of our youngsters had to drop out of the program because some were coming from St. Philip, and it was not practical because the only stipend that we could offer is $1.75 an hour. That's nothing. It really isn't. So by the time they paid for bus fare, they couldn't do anything else. I can't express what this program is to our young people. I am a parent who has a child in the program. I'm a volunteer. None of us gets paid. We do it because we know the benefits of the program. I came and I understood that some of our children, young people, wouldn't even look at other individuals. They wouldn't talk. Going down to St. James Parish Church enabled them to speak to the public. The taxi drivers supported them. But with COVID, that program went out the door, and that was our major income earner. So we're looking at maybe a bus pass for those that want to be involved in the program, that need to be involved in the program, because we're trying to give them livelihood skills that make them employable. Thankfully, some of them have gone on to actually get little jobs, and that's rewarding. But not only that, when they can now speak to one another, it is a program that enables them to socialize, but also get skills that will make them marketable. Absolutely, absolutely. So it's one that needs to be maintained, so we're asking about the subvention, we're asking about the bus pass. We don't want it to just be a program that teaches them the cooking skills and stuff like that. It also raises self-esteem, tells them the uniqueness that they have as individuals, and they are like anybody else, youngsters that need to be socially involved. We're all sociable. We need to be around our peers and stuff like that. If I could tell you the joy that my daughter gets just coming to that program, it's amazing. So we're trying to enhance it by also having some educational parameters, okay? And so we've reached out to the Barbados Council for the Disabled, but we're also looking to see what skills we can get. We reached out to BIDC to see if we could get some soap making, candle making, because we do baskets, seasonal baskets, so Christmas, Easter, whatever. And so we need that support. Marketing. We want some help with marketing.
I'm going to speak to the biggest business in whole town, because Massey is there.
Yes.
And the foot traffic through Massey every day is considerable.
Right.
And if all we're asking for is a little shelf space for people who depend on this as their sole source of income, I think Minister Strawn spoke in the same debate last Friday about the fact that the school that his son goes to has established also a mini-mart, or is about to establish a mini-mart, and that they already do farming, and they buy the vegetables from the thing.
Okay.
We have also agreed that our procurement rules must take into account and to have an affirmative action program for people who are disabled or differently able. In addition to that, Santia is going to look at the numbers, because it cannot break us to be able to add those for whom we have a responsibility with respect to the passage on the buses for the differently able and disabled. I also spoke ironically to Minister Strawn today and said that rather than doing the 1111 waivers for the modification of the cars, that if the person can show that they are registered with the National Council for the Disabled and that they have not owned a car and that they now need this car to modify, that it should be a policy, because it takes up too much time for it to come as an ad hoc approval, because invariably you're going to approve.
Right.
So that we need to have a clear policy rather than an ad hoc approach to it. But I like Mr. Hinkson speak, because as I said, he has been chair of the commission. As it relates to your subvention, suffice it to say that where it is possible, the others know that I don't stand on ceremony on these things. But if we can't, it is because we genuinely may be constrained, because we're going through state-owned enterprise reform and we have certain things. But if I can't give it to you one way, I'm going to help you fundraise. So one way or the other, you're going to get through, because I believe that what you all are doing is worthy. I said it in Parliament. This is one of the reasons why we've come to public life, to help people who would not otherwise have a voice, and for whom the other key thing is just the dignity. I've had to live in a house from when I was a baby with an aunt who is deaf-mute.
I know her.
So, you know her.
And I know your mom.
And she's 91 now,
Yes.
and is doing fabulously well. But we've never left her one single night alone in the 59 years that she has lived with my family. So I'm saying to you that what I can't do here, I'm sensitive enough to be able to do here, and we will work. And I believe that this government has tried its best to be able to put a new deal in place for those who cannot help themselves. My big, big wish before we leave, and I said it in Parliament 2 weeks ago, is to be able to help work with the organizations to develop a hospice, because I recognize too that parents or guardians need a break. And it's
Definitely.
called mental health relief. So whether it is a week or 2 weeks you want to go away, you should be able to have the comfort of knowing that your child, your charge, would not be in any way compromised or affected if they have to stay in an environment in order to be able to give you that break. And I want to be able to see more hospices, and we spoke to Barb about more senior citizens' homes also in parishes, rather than believing that everything will happen at the geriatric hospital. So, and the last point I make is the same point in the debate. A society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable. And more often than not, we have to see and have a different ethos. And I'd like to see, and I don't want to talk about death because death is morbid, but the reality is that many of the great bequests in the world, when people die and they're leaving things in the will, have been to charitable causes. And we need to see more and more Barbadians making arrangements to be able to leave a little something for an association that would not otherwise be able to help themselves. I know of many already, but we can do far more. So that I'd like us as a maturing society to also encourage people not just to covenant when they're alive, to give something when they're alive, but also to recognize that you can leave a little something for the associations that are doing excellent work to relieve the pressure on people. Eddie?
Okay. Thank you, Prime Minister. Pamela, first I want to publicly commend you for all you have done for persons with disabilities and for at First Base in my constituency, Greenwich, over the years. And I always look out for the interests of your daughter. So on the issue of the subvention, the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Minister Kurt Humphrey is here. Since we came into office, just over, 5.5 years ago, has given a 40% increase overall in subventions to about the 21 associations under the umbrella of the Council for the Disabled. So, Minister is here. He is extremely at the forefront of the whole effort by this government to improve the lives of persons with disabilities. And I'm sure if you send in the proper financials, etc., he and his permanent secretary will sit down and, give you the increase in subvention you're speaking about to continue and, in fact, augment the good work you're doing with craft and, whole issues to try to make people with disabilities more independent and, financially sustainable than they are at present. You heard the Prime Minister speak about the policy, and I believe I might have sent you the draft national policy.
You did.
And now it has been approved by Cabinet last Thursday with a few amendments we made coming out of the outreach we had in, over the last 2 months, the further outreach. There are a few amendments bringing some medium term up to short term. So tomorrow I will send you the final policy and the reports. Now that they've been approved by Cabinet, we were waiting on that. And you will see from there, there's a lot in terms of incentivizing and making the effort to make people with disabilities more independent, giving them incentives in terms of self-employment. You heard the Prime Minister speak about affirmative action principles for employment. So all of that is not going to happen overnight. It can't. It's a 7-year plan. And obviously, as resources come, we will do more. In terms of the transport, the last thing I'll say, the Ministry of People Empowerment, and, I was included, had a meeting a couple months ago with the private transport sector. And they are willing, of course, to bring in buses that will be for mobility challenged persons, just like how the Ministry of Public Works over the last 4 years has brought in 59 buses. All the new buses that the Ministry of Transport have brought in over the last 4 years and have facilities for mobility challenged persons. Up to, I think, last month, 6 weeks ago, they brought in a further 10. So the private transport sector, led by Roy Raphael, and at a town hall meeting we had, he in fact came and proposed it. They are willing to bring in buses. I believe they've been given monies by the government, a subvention to do so. There's going to have to be some dialogue between the Ministry of People Empowerment and the Ministry of Finance on further incentives they are asking for. And I know Minister Humphrey is fully aware, and I believe, we'll soon be contacting Minister Strawn on those issues, because we all know the cost of transportation for people with disabilities. So we're working on it, ma'am. I will send you the documents tomorrow, and you know that you can call me on it. All right?
Okay. I appreciate that very much. I just had one more question. Some time back, our association was involved in discussion with the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs regarding the mangrove agricultural project. I'm not sure if that is still happening. It may not be. And last but not least, as I said, marketing is extremely important. And if we can get any assistance, I see all these wonderful people out here who would be willing to support First Base, buy some of our wonderful delicacies. So I just need to let people know where we are, how to find us, because you can attest to the fact that our young people make some excellent, excellent local food and baked products. Thank you so much. I appreciate the work that you have done. in bringing that legislation about, and I look forward to you sending me the final copy. Thank you.
Let me say. Just to answer your question, Pam, on people with disabilities and agriculture, there's a program through the National Disabilities Unit for about the last 6 months. I know it began this year, to promote agriculture among people with disabilities. And I believe they might have had a graduation class already on it, and it's a continuing program. So there is also that recent policy initiative to bring people with disabilities into agriculture to earn a living, but also to help sustain themselves in terms of food security. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I just want to say that I think you've brought a certain level of awareness this evening on people with disabilities, and also to say, MP Hinkson, you have led the commission as well in relation to this area, and we were remarking earlier that just by the number of persons here with disabilities, I think the word is getting out that we want to include people more. We recognize obviously there's still a lot of work to do, but I think that the process has started, certainly with engaging with the various ministries to make people more aware of the work that has to be done. Certainly within public transportation, we have the call a ride system through the transport board. We're obviously in discussions trying to see if we can expand that further, and we do support not only government providing the buses for persons with disabilities, but also encouraging the private sector as well to get heavily involved in helping to build out the available transportation to people who have disabilities. So thank you again. Next person.
Good evening. My name is Carlisle Eiffel. I am a property owner at Reed Gap, the Garden St. James. I wish to say this evening that I want to thank the minister, the member for St. James North, Mr. Hinkson. I want to say a special thank you for your assistance to us, the property owners at Reed Gap, the Garden St. James, because you have been there with us and you have been very consistent in your persistent in messaging the ministry and the drainage unit on our behalf. Secondly, I wish to say that Town Country Planning has given a developer permission to develop part of the land at Reed Gap, the Garden St. James. And that developer has dug down part of the hill, and he has diverted the water course, and that water has flooded and our properties at the top of Reed Gap, the Garden St. James. I do not understand why the Ministry of Town Country Planning would have given permission and then do not pay attention to what the developer was doing and to see the effect that he had created for us at the top of Reed Gap. I remember hearing our Prime Minister said at one of her forums in St. George that developers are doing things and they're not completing what they ought to do, and then they expect the government to come in and to clean up what they are doing. I would like to suggest that when Town Country Planning has given permission to developers, that they pay attention to what those developers are doing. And thirdly, when the drainage unit sent in their unit to do something about the water course on the 5th of this month, which was Tuesday. And until now, we are waiting until we get the downpour of rain to find out if the water has been diverted and going into the natural ravine where it should go and going to the suck wells. We are still waiting on that. When that has come to fruition, we would know if we have to call back in the drainage unit to complete that job. Thirdly, we, the property owners, feel very disappointed that on the 6th of this month, which was Wednesday, there was an entourage of cars, government workers and officials went to the top of the gap. They came up the gap, they passed all of the property owners, went to the top of the gap, looked at the problem. They never consulted a single member of the properties up there. And then they turn around, their cars stopped in front of the residence, and one of the residents was standing inside of his gate, and not a single word was said to him by any member of that entourage. I am sure that our Prime Minister would never have gone into that area and not consulted with any of those property owners to let them know and find out what problems they were having. We, the property owners, feel very offended at what took place, and we were ignored from that entourage that went into that gap on the 6th, which is Wednesday gone. We are disappointed at what occurred. We are grateful for what they had done by sending in the unit to try to rectify the problem. But then, afterwards, we thought that it would have been very courteous to have informed us and speak to us, who were the property owners that had the problems. We believe that that was very bad behavior that they exercised to us. And we are not happy about it, and we want our Prime Minister to know that in spite of the fact that we are appreciative of what was done, we are disappointed in the end at what took place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eiffel, and may I apologize for the fact that nobody spoke to the residents to let them know what was being done. And I'm sure that the Deputy Prime Minister will ensure that they come back and they speak to the residents, because at the end of the day, all we're doing is serving you as citizens and taxpayers. Okay? Who is it? But was it Public Works that came, or was it the developer?
Exactly who they were. But there was a whole entourage that came up there.
No, but who you complaining about that didn't come and talk to the residents? The developer or the public work officers?
I'm speaking about officers that
That's what I
came.
thought.
There was about 5 or 7 cars that came up there, Prime Minister.
Officers, 'cause he said he was grateful for them for coming, but they did not apologize. They didn't explain. Sorry.
That's
I am apologizing for that,
I appreciate.
and I'm asking the DPM to make sure that they come back, the officers come back and at least have a meeting with the residents. It doesn't have to be a long meeting like this, but they need to come and explain to the residents what has been done and why, etc. So I hear you, sir.
Prime Minister, I know if I were a betting man, that you would never ever have done that.
Well, sir, I don't have eyes in the back of my head, but in the front of my forehead. And therefore, I'm saying they will come and they'll explain to you, and I apologize profusely again, sir. Okay? Have the problems been solved now, though? So the rain will test it. Mr. Yerwood, do you want to, DPM is asking that you perhaps speak. Where is he? Come, sir. You're going too far back because you're going to keep calling you.
Hello.
Yes. We were brought in, we are aware of the problem by the residents and the MP Hinkson, in which a developer did some work and blocked a water course, in fact covered the water course. And we were using town planning to get the developer to enforce it. It took excessively long, so we moved in and do the work. I don't think it's not completely finished. We've done it's not completely finished. We spend, we worked some days, and I said, guys, we're in the south, in the north, let's do that one as well. But we've done significant work to ensure that most of the water will go the normal route it has taken. Hello? I was not, well, I think the ministry did go. And
you know, as leader of the country, I've already apologized.
Yes.
So just make sure that you and your officers meet with the residents for me, please.
We
so
have
I don't have to apologize a second time.
We have met previously with and spoken to what I consider to be the person representing the interest in there who lives in Prospect and who's been doing the work.
Clearly, there are other people who have expressed concern.
Indeed.
I cannot go behind that.
No,
Could you please just make sure that all of the residents, and it may be useful, if you want to give them a one-pager as to what has been done and what has not been done, so you can give it to every household, and then make yourself available for questions at X time, having given out the document. That would work?
Yes.
Lord bless you. Thank you.
Hi, Gary, Prime Minister, fellow members in the audience and the ministers. I have 3 points or 3 questions. Sorry, Dante Harvey, Oxner, St. James. Harvey, yes, please. Harvey. Yes, please. The first one is in relations to the lights and some urgent repairs to the Melbourne Pavilion and the Desmond Hayes Pavilion. There is practically no nightlife for the youngsters at the Melbourne Pavilion, so there's a question on that. And secondly, we are requesting or asking for some changing rooms and bathroom facilities at the Lakers home court in Husband, St. James. In addition to that request, we're also asking for a small roller skating area, as roller skating is not one of the new things in Barbados. We're asking for that to be obliged at the Husband's court.
Okay, thank you. I think we've taken note of it. And once again, the Minister of Sports is here, but we also have to make sure that we deliver across the board. I can only give you my piece of advice that your MP and you may have to treat to one of these projects as a community project rather than believing that you're going to get all 3 with 30 constituencies to benefit. So that's straight talk from the heart.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. And finally, my final one is dealing with housing. And we're just seeking some clarity on when the remainder repairs to the housing units in Hayesville will recommence. Majority of them had damages to the roofs and some leakage is being taken place in the units.
I happen to know that the Minister of Sports used to be a basketball coach, so you might be lucky on one.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Housing for where?
Hayesville. The majority of the units, some repairs were started, but then it was stopped, so they'll be asking when it's going to start back.
I am not in a position. Is the Minister of Housing here? National Housing here? Please, are you in a position to speak to Hayesville? I can't hear you, sir. As I just said, we've been spending millions of dollars on the electrical rewiring, and Hayesville has been one of the largest beneficiaries. In addition to that, you may want to say what is being done at Hayesville and the absence of the minister, please.
Well, we've carried out significant work on the depots at Hayesville, but with respect to what he's asking about the houses, I will look into that tomorrow to see where we are. But we've done significant repairs on those roofs at Hayesville, including electrical work as well. If there are any remaining,
I know about
we'll
the
deal with it.
electrical, but the other work that you're doing there is what?
Well, we've done, and apart from that, we've done the repairs to roofs which were leaking. And we will look into whatever else has to be done. I'll do that for you tomorrow.
Do you know how many units, by any chance? Do you know how many units? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Who's next?
Good night, Prime Minister. Good night, ministers. My name is Gina Bab, and I reside. Good night. Any better? My name is Gina Bab. My name is Gina Bab. I reside in Mount Stafford. My first concern is Storehouse Road. This is from the Garden Seventh-day Adventist Church, leading all the way past Patton Gardens, Yearwood Road. That road is in urgent need of repairs. And not just patching, repaving. Also, when you get to the top of Storehouse Road, there is a mirror, or supposed to be a mirror, ahead of you, but the mirror is missing. Also, at that junction, there is some bush on your right, so you can experience some difficulty getting out of that gap when vehicles are coming from Porters.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Also, a no parking sign was erected on that road, but persons are ignoring that no parking sign. Not wanting to take away
So you need cameras to be able to monitor and to be able to issue tickets. Yeah?
not wanting to take away from anyone's livelihood, but most of those persons who park there are not going to the Garden Church. There are some instances when you are turning from the main road to go to Storehouse Gap, but because half of the road is blocked, you can experience a case where your trunk is in the main road and oncoming traffic. So it's not
I think
safe.
what we're going to have to do, and we're starting it probably even just opposite here when we build the Civic Center and the car park. But it is clear that there are going to have to be a number of parking facilities. We've spoken about it already. If my memory serves me correctly, a lot of the people parking there going to the beach, right? As I tell you, I know the issues. So that because there are so few opportunities for parking, and I'm going to have to ask Mr. Headley and Town Planning to work with the Ministry of Housing to be able to identify lots where we can do an RFP and make it available to a private investor to be able to put car parks, because what is happening is a clash between the rights of residents and the rights of others to enjoy the economy of the coast, and the economy of the coast is also what helps pay people and supply jobs. So that the answer, in my view, yes, we can look and try and enforce the no parking sign, and we must do that and have that in terms of parking tickets issued to people. But in the interim, the people really need a solution, because you can't be saying tourism is our business and we don't have the infrastructure to facilitate it. And equally, you can't be saying to Bajans that only tourists can go on the beach, or that you can only come to the beach if you catch a bus or you walk. So therefore, we're going to have, and we've discussed this, all of Highway 1 and all of Highway 7 are going to need to have, Mr. Headley, have we discussed this? Periodic car parks every couple of miles, mile and a half, 2 miles, whatever. And what then supplements that is ultimately shuttle buses. So you need a West Coast shuttle, a South Coast shuttle, and a round the town, Bridgetown shuttle. And that way people will go in the car parks. We're looking possibly, we're going to need one also in that Waterford area, because you have the botanical gardens, you'll have the stadium, you have Derelict, so that wherever we can put, and then those can be used for park and ride as well. Okay? But the reality is that we have a country. When I came to public life, Barbados had about 85,000 cars. I'm told that it is now over 130,000, Santia, that are registered, which means that we also have to make decisions because of the explosion in the number of cars on the same kilometers, of roads that we have. Okay? The island hasn't really gotten that much bigger. But we hear you on both public accesses as well as car parks. Okay?
Also, along Storehouse Road, there is a no dumping sign. Persons are also ignoring the no dumping sign.
There, people are dumping?
Right on the main road by the church. They're dumping right there. And there's a no
Okay,
park, there's a no dumping
Minister
sign.
Ford, when you go to see Ms. Denny, could you please go to Storehouse Road and look and see about the dumping, please, and let the SSA deal with it, and see whether there's a skip, because more often than not, people don't just dump on a front road unless there is a lack of somewhere to put. And therefore, what may be needed is a skip there or some kind of built thing where people can legitimately put stuff that is more than what they have outside of their house. Okay?
I also wanted to speak about Seaview, but someone touched on that already. Also, I also wanted to speak about Seaview. I was really hoping that when Houghton was paved, that somehow they would have done Seaview as well, but nothing has been done with Seaview. Next, Westmoreland. When you're going up Westmoreland, along the edges of the road are eaten away. If you don't be careful, you might try to avoid an incoming car, and then you hit a ditch on your left. That's if you're going up the hill or down the hill. Either way.
So what's the issue?
The edges of the road are eaten away.
The edges are eaten away.
Yeah.
So it's like Orange Hill.
Yeah.
Right. So both Westmoreland and Orange Hill, you know what that's a sign of? MTW? Mrs. Canterbury, what's that a sign of? Talk to the country for me, please. Because it's only going to get worse and worse unless there is a change of course. And it is happening in too many roads across the country. Come for mine. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Prime Minister. Good evening, members of the Cabinet, ladies and gentlemen. What I believe we need in these two roads, as well as many others, we need to harden the edges, right? That will make concrete work. It's quite expensive. What's happening over the years is that we've been widening the roads and not hardening the edges or putting sidewalks. MTW at this point in time needs to go forward instead of simply just widening the roads so that cars go. What we're looking at is doing some more planning, surveying the roads, looking at where the water is going and that type of thing, but it's going to take time and a lot of money. So I would like to ask you to bear with us. I can give you pretty promises and that type of thing, but we have various roads that are priority, and some like Westmoreland Road, like I went through, Porter's Road, like I went through last night. I've gone through the holes and that type of thing because I spend a lot of time out here. So I'm well aware of it. What I will do is speak to the technicians and see if in the meantime what we can do is do some patching on the sides and any other areas as well. What's happening is the road needs to have concrete on the edges to keep it in. Right. Correct. So it's a little more than simply dealing with the edges. As the Prime Minister mentioned, the water is actually creating the problem. But if we are dealing with something like putting concrete down, which is quite expensive, I think it makes sense to do a little bit more. Vehicles are moving quicker, there are more vehicles. So we need to do something with the vulnerable road users. And that includes pedestrians, so sidewalks is part of it. So I don't like doing half of a job. I prefer to do a full job. Thank you.
A lot of those roads that have serious incline and are subject to water erosion, because you heard Mr. Leslie, you're having shorter, sharper showers, which means that you're more likely to get a deluge of water, which means that the attrition is more potholes, but also more sides of the road, if not properly. And that is why the government has gotten the Latin American Development Bank to sponsor the secondment of Dr. Best from the Caribbean Development Bank to come in as the climate infrastructure advisor to be able to restate all of the standards that we used in the past, in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the first 2 decades of this century. None of those are appropriate anymore, not true? You've got to revisit every single standard of civil infrastructure in this country for roads and wells if we are going to make sure that we have a resilient network. And whether we like it or not, it is upon us. You all saw what happened in Libya? You saw what happened in Libya? I want you all to look at the papers and read. Tens of thousands of people were washed out to sea because of a flood and a dam breaking. Remember what happened to Karoo? Remember the Karoo? Well, multiply that by about 10 or 15,000. In fact, nobody knows the number. And that's what makes it difficult. So when we say to Barbadians, and I'm going to ask MPs, because that is going to have to be part and parcel of our conversation with our constituents, that we need to be able to change how we do things, how we make sure that water doesn't gather, how we save water, how we deal with the hurricane straps on the roof, all of those things, because I want to knock some wood fast and somebody knock it for me. But the truth is that at some point we will have our turn. Okay? Thank you. I'm conscious of the time and the line, and we have public servants out. So I try not to go past 10 o'clock. So I'm going to ask people to speed up, and if it is something that can be taken offline, I would ask you to do it, since we have a number of things, and to let there at least, what, 6 other people, 7 other people? Okay? Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Who's next?
Hi, good evening. I'm Ann Harding, and I really appreciate that you'll listen to what I have to say. It's hard for me to say because I feel it very deeply, and what I want to speak to is about what I'm hearing about demolition of the historic public services complex in Halltown. This really hurts my heart to hear that because of, well, 3 main issues. One is loss of culture. It's like respect. It takes a long time to build it up, but it's pretty quick to take a ball and chain and wreck it, right? It's quick to tear it down, but it takes a long time to build it.
Because the acoustics are so bad, we're just having a little difficulty. And you said loss of culture?
Loss of culture is the first part of this issue. So I don't know if anybody else likes those buildings, or if those buildings mean anything to anybody like they do to me, but I've only lived here 10 years. I can't imagine that people that have lived here all their lives in this area wouldn't feel a connection with those buildings just because of their beauty. The voices of your ancestors speak through the majesty of the construction and the beauty of those buildings. You can't help but admire them when you look at them, and you think of the people that built them and the pride that they must have had in the work that what they achieved under probably great adversity as well. Okay, so I just feel that they're an important part of the culture of this area, and to think that we could just, knock them down, that really hurts me. So, you know, that's one part of it. The second part is in respect to loss of access to the beach, because one of the first thing that happens, we've all seen it. Now, this is something I'm sure everybody's more impacted by, but as soon as you sell this beachfront property to a developer, walls go up. First, they're temporary walls to protect everybody from the dust of the construction. Never mind the fish, they'll run away and come back after the dust settles. But, you know, and then a permanent wall goes up. And it's happened all along the West Coast. I'm not telling anybody anything new because we've lost a lot of access to the beach along the West Coast. There needs to be policy that can be retrospective to say for every however many meters, you've got to give this many meters of public beach access. You can't just build permanent walls from north to south and just, you can't just let that happen. It just shouldn't happen, but it is happening. So that's the beach access. And the third thing is in respect to the first aspect of what troubles me about this is the importance of the centrality of those public services. Because, and I don't know if the Honorable Mr. Humphrey is still here, but I was asking, you know, why don't you come down on a day when the pensioners are standing in the post office to get their pension money and just talk to them. I'm sure they'd love to talk to him about how they got there. And if you move it to some place like with the BWA up on the ABC Highway or SSA out there near the mangrove facility, then, you know, how are these people going to get there? I mean, you look at these people, Mia, these people, they're frail little old people. I don't know how they get there. I was saying to Mr. Humphrey, I don't know if he's still here, but I was saying, come and talk to these people and find out how they got there, because if you're looking to relocate those services, what about those people? How are they?
Okay. I'm not sure that I got everything that you said, because as I said, the acoustics are really, really bad. Mm-hmm. But what I heard with respect to public access to beaches, one of the reasons I started the night by talking and asking for Mr. Rowe, who is the deputy at the Coastal Zone Management Unit, to speak, is that I met with them in April, as I said, and I asked them to give me a plan, because half of your problem with access to beaches on the West Coast is the fact that you've had significant erosion and traditional access points are no longer there. So that we need to do two things. We need to make sure that there is periodic access, and once again, because it's not a greenfield site, to arbitrarily choose a number will be to cause injustice and for the government to have to pay out money that it may not have. But what we can do is make sure that we find all credible accesses and make sure that people have them. There are some Caribbean countries, regrettably, where people cannot get to go to the beach unless they pay money to go through an access point. Barbados is not one of them. Secondly, because of that, if we can do, and from what they have told me, and tell me if I'm wrong, Mr. Rowe, that you have indicated that we can work at about 3 or 4 beaches at a time, and that it takes about 9 months or so, 9 to 12, they say sometimes 6, but usually 9 to 12, to be able to rebuild the beach and to do the things that we have done on, we've done it selectively on a few beaches on the West Coast already. We're saying no, we want the whole. And we will also not look at it as government alone, but those who can afford it on the beach will be asked to help carry some of the costs, because everybody's going to benefit ultimately. And that's why we prefer to be able to buy the barge and the dredger and to have people working every day, continuously at it. Based on what they've said, this will take anywhere from 3 to 4 years so that we can have the West Coast done. I've also said to them, when we finish there, we need to look at the East Coast, because everybody talks about the West Coast, but the East Coast is having significant erosion as well. And because it is not in the eyes of as many people, it's more off the beaten track, we're not paying the attention. So believe you me, we were ahead of most countries in the region by establishing the Coastal Zone Management Unit, what, 40 years ago roughly? Okay? But we need now for them to be able to put everything in a single project, projectize it, and do it over the 4-year period for the West Coast, and then have a concomitant project plan for the East Coast. As it relates to services, we believe in the decentralization of services rather than centralization. Largely, and I'm not sure if that was your issue, but largely to ensure that people in the north, east, west, and south can access services without everybody having to come to town. And that is why we've tried to put things in Speightstown, Holetown, Bridgetown, Oistins, Six Roads, Horse Hill, Belle Plaine. Warrens is taking up more and more services. So, and more with the technology, we're trying to push as many people as possible who can do their business online to do it, so that you reduce the congestion and you reduce the expenditure that people have to spend in getting to the particular services. So I hear you on that. With respect to the heritage assets, it's not just heritage assets, but also trees. Most people in Barbados don't know that it is against the law to cut down mature trees without the chief town planners, the director of planning now, permission. So we need to perhaps do strong PSAs again, but I also want us to be sensitive to one point, that while we may want to keep the aesthetic of what I call the Barbadian vernacular, in some instances it may look cute, but it was not appropriate for for families, or not big enough for families, or not practical enough. So we have to be able to look still at functionality while keeping aesthetics as part of the thing that we want to promote. Barbados has a unique approach, yes, to the building of chattel houses and bungalows, but we can't ask people to be stuck 2 centuries ago either, and they need to be able to ensure that they can be living in a functional environment. So it is how best planning can keep the aesthetics as a condition, particularly in certain areas, but at the same time recognize that people want functionality, and in this heat and this kind of thing, we need to remember some old-time principles that the old builders used to build that the young builders have forgotten. That wind comes in on the east and goes up on the west. My father used to call it the cowshed principle. And that how you pitch the house, the roof, is important, making sure your overhangs are not large so that the roof can't just be taken off. There was a lot of wisdom in the Barbadian vernacular. But I accept that for many, it is just simply too small and too incapable of expansion. And for some people, they want, therefore, to modify and move. So we have to find a way of, at the Nightingale home, there was the building for Samuel Jackman Prescott, national hero. First black person to be elected to Parliament. No doubt a national treasure. But guess what was happening? It became a nuisance to the children who were running around and who live on that property as a home. And what we had to agree is that we would knock it down, but that we would insist that the vernacular and the architectural design be retained in the reconstruction of it. I'm happy to say that not only was it done, but there's a magnificent building paying tribute to the heroes, but at the same time acting as dormitories for many little girls who do not have the ability to have a home of their own. So we'll mix and balance. So thank you.
Just to clarify, what I was referring to by the importance of the centrality, I was referring to the same thing that you're talking about when you talk about decentralization. I'm referring to access, the same as what you are with talking about decentralization. That's what I meant by the importance of the centrality.
That's why I said I wasn't sure that I was hearing
yeah.
you properly.
Yeah.
Because of the mic and the acoustics,
Yeah.
but thank you for that contribution.
Thank you for listening. I just don't think I could watch it happen and know that I didn't take the opportunity to say something, but I want to also say thank you, Mia, for getting people to clean up, because you tell people to go clean up, and when you tell people to go clean up, they go clean up, and I've seen that help a lot, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And I'm going to try to start a movement, and I'm going to talk to the country about it, because I really do feel that once every 2 months or so, we need to be able to have a voluntary commitment to clean up an area in order to make sure that the country remains pristine.
I can tell you,
So
I see a movement happening.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, all. My name is Bernstein Scott. Good evening, all. My name is Bernstein Scott, and I'm here with.
I am Joy Fort Craig. We're speaking on two issues. We're going to speak on two issues. We're going to be trying to be as quick as possible. Our first issue is that we are here on the behalf of the St. James North DEO, and we are very concerned about the floodings that we are having on the West Coast. A lot of water is coming off the top, and we have certain areas where there is flooding that we don't normally get, especially in Bears Road. There's a elderly lady who every time there is serious flooding, she has to be rescued from her home. There is a young man in Yearwood Road in Mount Stanford, and he lives on the lower end of the bridge. He has mobile issues, and whenever there is heavy downpours and the water comes under the bridge, he is at risk. He is at serious risk. The sidewalks that are being built, they don't give access for water to drain off. The water is being captured on the road, and so we are having some serious flooding.
A few more of the issues.
I want to thank you for that. I want to ask Mr. Yewer to come forward, but I want to remind you that that's one of the reasons why we got the sponsorship from the Latin American Development Bank to have Dr. Best seconded to be able to help deal with some of these issues, because if we keep building the same way, as you've just said, with different volumes of water coming off, there are going to be problems. I want to salute you for knowing who you have to go for to move when you see heavy rain, because the most perfect application of the district emergency management system is for you to know who you have to prevent from harm before it happens. And the fact that you've come out tonight, the fact that you know the people, is an indicator that you are on top of your job, but we would like also others to replicate that, because it's not only moving them, but making sure you know what to move them with, from medication right back through. Yes, sir.
Another issue, some of the other issues were also covered earlier by members within our constituents, our DEO. If you recognize, these persons have mobility challenges, such as the Miss Denny, the guy there in Reed Road. And we need to look at these things a bit more from a town planning perspective. As you know, the West Coast carries the second largest tributaries of water after the Constitution River. And most of them fall within St. James North. And property development and blockages of waterways, even by Ministry of Transport and Water Resources, where in front of St. Albans School there were drains, but they were recently filled with concrete structures, now creating flooding in the St. Albans corner.
Let me help you, because Mr. Headley is here, as well as the chief. But I don't think it was the chief with us that day. I went with you in St. Thomas just before I relieved myself of the Ministry of Planning and handed it to Senior Minister Duguid. And I can tell you for sure that there are developments that I refuse to approve until they came back with better drainage plans. There was one that wanted to fill up a bottom. You remember? I have said I am not approving it unless if I had allowed that to happen, that water would come off the ridge in St. Thomas and go into where? St. James. And from St. Thomas to St. James into what? The coast. You understand? But along the way, you're dealing with houses. And as I said, I pointed reference just now to what happened in Libya, not by accident, because people need to understand that these things can cause significant damage to people, particularly with the force. The morning that Carew died, we left the Ministry of Education at 4 o'clock in the morning, because that was when we finished the education white paper. And the skies opened up in this country at 4 in the morning. So there was no surprise that somebody got injured in the way in which he died in Lower Carlton when it happened. So I hear you, and I believe that town planning is on top of it. The issue though, Mr. Headley and Trevor, I believe comes in enforcement. And therefore we need to make sure that when people are given conditions, they don't breach the conditions in ways that we've had a similar problem with housing developments, especially St. Philip is riddled with them. Housing developments where the developer simply has not complied with the appropriate sidewalks, with the appropriate communal space, and in some instances, those were not conditions when some of those developments went through in the 60s and 70s. Okay? So I'd like Mr. Headley, I'm conscious of the time, I'd like Mr. Yearwood, sorry, to respond to the areas that you spoke about, Beards Road, and the one in Mount Stanford as well, to be able to tell us, and generally, about the watershed and the movement of water on this area coming down.
I know of the Yearwoods Road situation. A lot of that road development is what's happening above on Westmoreland. And you have, in some cases, the water shifting downstream from one. The watercourses are not defined in the way after the development. They are now coming concrete and through roads and then back of houses and the like. We have to look at ways in which we have to go back and increase the way in which water comes off. So it's no longer a benchmark of having, say, a well every 300 feet. And we have to improve, and particularly in the coastal where we have known the depth of wells is limited. Most of the time you have a high water table, and it's really get the water at source higher up in the reaches so you can get into the aquifer and get below ground quicker. I will speak to the persons and visit those, or have the officer visit specifically those Beards Road. I'm not sure what's happening at Beards Road.
I think
but I
that
want to make a case for...
If you give the public,
yeah,
you may have in the ministry to do some PSAs that speak to what is and isn't allowed and what is and isn't encouraged.
Yeah.
Because the notion of people filling drains with concrete and that kind of thing doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Because people will suffer and people will, in some instances, die. Okay, so I think we need to do the PSAs, but you have to give the technical advice along with the planning and development department.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will do.
Thank you.
One more point for the DEO.
I don't know. You could talk to us after. Because how many more people left? 3, and it's 10 past 10. So let's apply our hearts to wisdom. Thank you. Yes.
Good night, everyone. There are, my name, Jeromina Aurelien. Jeromina Aurelien. Jeromina Aurelien. Number 57, Trent, St. James. Okay, there's a marker. Across the street from here, there are 9 homes towards the end of Highway 1. I live directly opposite the primary school. Good. I'm going to start with a quote that my youngest son said to me, and it is, "Mommy, they're coming for us. Where do we go?" There's a reason why. Early in the morning, I opened my window and I saw a land surveyor surveying the land straight across the playing field. By our window, straight across the playing field. I don't know the reason why. My neighbors don't know the reason why. So I'm asking, why?
Is the land yours?
Rented. I asked my landlady also.
And the landlady, nobody's taking anybody's land down there, so you don't have to worry about
But
that.
I'm wondering
but the
why.
land surveyor, there will be some buildings and a civic center built opposite. But nobody is coming to take anybody's property, so I don't think you need to worry about that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're most welcome, my dear. I thought you were going to ask me about the flooding, and I hope it has improved. The drainage hasn't improved. It's still bad. Okay? No problem. I hear you. And that's why I thought I can deal with that.
Good night. My name is Stevenson Tull, and I'm a member of the Western Fisher Folk and Community. Stevenson Tull. And I'm here on behalf of the Western Fisher Folk and Community. And we would like to highlight to issues with Western. We would like to find out exactly what the plan is for the fire station. And I have suggestions that can be discussed at a different time as to what can come at the state that is in now. No major repairs, but we have youngsters in the community that really has nothing to do. We can start adding some training, making nets, things to do with fishing, using the space.
The fish market is being rebuilt now?
Yes, and I want to say thank you for
I just wanted to ask, so when we finish spending money, as Mr. Hickson may know only better than I do, when we finish spending money on fixing the fish market, then we can start to talk about what we will do for the fire station. Mr. Hickson knows that.
Okay.
Long time.
Well, thank you.
And the commitment was made that ultimately, and the government has turned down offers for that to be sold to the private sector. And we have said already that when we can, we will fix there for community entrepreneurial activity from people for St. James primarily. Now that may include restaurants or vending booths or whatever, but I think you would know that in an IMF program and doing all of the other things we're doing, because we're also trying to fix after Highway 7, Highway 1 from right here in Holetown back down to Spikestown. And we're trying to use planning gains to be able to help people, help us fix that road going down. So all I'm trying to tell you is that I have noticed a certain similarity tonight. And if these people in 3 MPs I got in St. James feel that Christmas is in October or September, I would want to remind them that I still have 30 constituencies and Christmas is still December.
Okay, one more. Right next to the fire station, which is the same Carew spot that you mentioned several times tonight, is being used for boats stored. If we look around the community in Barbados on the West Coast, there's nowhere to haul a boat in the case of emergency.
I honestly can't tell you. I do know that we went on the same site visit with Mr. Hinkson and gave a commitment to a hard court in the back there, behind the community center, right? So therefore, the bottom line is that we may have to find other places. We know that one of the planning gains, Mr. Headley, for the beaches hotel when it starts to build is a slipway right there above Port St. Charles, correct? So that we may have to look for other locations where boats can be hauled out and stored.
But it's a fishing community, and the hurricane season is coming.
I am with you.
And in the event that a boat needs to be hauled out in the case of emergency, we can't get into Port St. Charles without permission.
My brother.
We only have one space.
My brother, what did you hear me say?
Western.
What did you hear me say?
That you got a lot of other places to take care of too.
Yeah, that's why I said first, but you didn't hear the second part.
No, you didn't.
That we are doing a slipway by Port St. Charles, and further that we will look for other opportunities on the West Coast where we can do similar haul out and storage. But you can't do it unless you have the land. You agree?
So that area does not belong to the government?
If you and Mr. Hinkson want to tell the community that they can lose the hard court,
the hard court is
community
gone.
courts, then
the hard court is actually gone because the temporary
But he
market,
asked back for it.
So you give us something, take back something. I mean, where are we going?
No. He asked back for the hard court for the community. Now, if it is you are saying, because there's only, how big the land is? The land is not very big.
It's big enough for the community to use.
But that's the point. But if you have said, and Eddie, you have to decide with the community, that you carried the Ministry of Sports down there and told us that you want a hard court built back there. Now, if it is that you don't want the hard court...
Oh, we do want the hard court.
No, you can't have both. Because the area is small. So that's why I'm saying that if you can identify another area, okay? Because my memory of the area is that it is not a big area.
The temporary market will be moved eventually when the Millie Eiffel market is complete. So the hard court will come back to use. But be it for a parking lot and not even a table tennis, a road tennis court.
I am saying to you, go back and have the visit. because at the end of the day, when we went to do the site visit, nobody raised anything to do with boat storage. If that is the wish of the community, we are more than happy to accommodate it, because it will cost us less money to put up the hard courts and the lights than it would cost to store the boats. So I'm saying to the MP and to you, meet with the residents and come back and tell us what the residents want. Okay?
The fishing community wants a land storage for the boats, and the fishing community wants to be able to haul the boats out and do repairs on the beach.
And we are your humble servants.
Thank you.
Meet with the residents and determine what the residents want. Because the one thing I can't do is give you land that's not there.
Okay.
The land is limited in size. Anybody who knows the area, I know St. Albans well, I know Lower Carlton well. You understand? And I'm telling you that my understanding of what is there is not a big set of land to accommodate both easily. Now, if you have other pieces of land in the same district, because one of the things that we have to find down there also is a parking, what you heard me say, an area for car park. Because one of the major accesses to the beach is there by where? Thunder Bay. And the same thing that the lady complained about with Storehouse Gap, going all up the gap, going up, is the same thing that happens now on weekends. Not true?
Yes.
So that's why I said, please, have the site visit, talk to the community, and come back to us. And we are your humble servants.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Right next to the fire station where the water went down through by Carew.
With all due respect, the area next to the fire station, if we go and block that up with anything, then it becomes a hindrance for the water to move through.
We're not talking about blocking. We're talking about just laying some marl where boats can haul up.
And that's what I'm saying. Go and have the site visit. I can make sure the officers come.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. My name is Angelina Michaud Richards. Angelina Michaud Richards. M-I-C-H-A-U-D Richards. My concern is this. I have a question. The question is, has provision been made to place social workers into our primary schools?
That we have social workers across the board that we had created. I don't know that we have one for each primary school, and quite frankly, we're trying to do many things. We've just agreed to add to the education vote $5 million a year by keeping the primary school monitors that we brought on during COVID and retraining them as classroom, you want to speak here? Come, classroom assistants? Come.
Hi, good evening. As Prime Minister said, yes, we are seeking to reinforce the type of support we have in school for the social and emotional well-being of the students. And that has a number of things. And PM started talking about the transition we have made for the school assistants who are actually now being trained at Erdiston Teachers Training College in helping us to be better able to manage some of the needs of the respective schools. Specific to your question about social workers, we do have social workers in the primary school. I believe it was in 2020 that we moved from having just 2 to 9. So 7 were added within the last several years. As Prime Minister said, we may not be able to afford having a social worker in 100 and something schools. There are 68 primary schools, there are 21 secondary schools, and that has nothing to do with the special needs schools and others. So to be able to put 100 and something social workers, 1 in every school, is at this time not feasible. However, what we do have in the schools, we do have school counselors, We do have about several of those in the primary school, about 5. We do have social workers in the primary school level as well. We have safety officers, all of whom part of their qualification in the secondary level is that they must also have the social work qualification. We also have the school counselors and we have guidance counselors all together. In every single secondary school, there are guidance counselors. Part of the conversation that we have started with the Ministry of People Empowerment is to make sure that the social workers that are available through the Ministry of People Empowerment might also be brought into the school system, because oftentimes when we find a child that needs social work support, it is the entire family. And therefore, the wraparound services that we will need to support the entire family, it therefore has to be a collaborative effort between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of People Empowerment. Those conversations have started, and Minister Humphrey and I will continue. So just letting you know, we are seeking to reinforce the support for social workers. We have already started to increase. Unfortunately, I don't think our Minister of Finance and our Prime Minister will allow us to have 100 and something more put in the schools. But what we are trying to do is to add more support for the social and emotional learning needs of our students. And finally, there are a number of non-profit organizations that have offered to give some additional support, and we need to carry those conversations a little further to make sure that whether it is in the faith-based community where you have qualified persons who can do some social work in collaboration with our other agencies as well as some counseling, because social work and counseling are not the same, that we are able to do so.
Okay, one other question.
Let me just say, there's one other person, so I'll ask you to hold on the second question. But let me say, as the lady comes, the Ministry of People Empowerment has literally been working to make every social worker a primary responder, because if we only look at what we have in each department, we would never have enough. But when we look at what we have island-wide, we have over 350, and therefore we are seeking to redeploy them to be able to get the best use. Your name, ma'am. And ma'am, I really have to beg you to hold. This is the last.
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister, respective ministers, and everyone. My name is Paulavette Atkinson, and I am from First Street, Whole Town, St. James. My query is what can be done to remove the loud, salacious, and misogynistic lyrics, nasty lyrics, off of some of our privately owned public service vehicles that traverse the West Coast. Not only from driving behind these vehicles, but having taken the van recently when my car was down, I was overwhelmed. And I can only imagine then other commuters and children, especially during peak times, being bombarded by these lyrics. So it is it's something that I would like to have addressed. Thank you.
Right, so we recently would have made some changes in terms of the regulations. The regulations were approved by Cabinet. There's just one more change to be made in relation to the owner's responsibilities, and the regulations will include provisions to be able to stop the playing of the loud music, and certainly, obviously, the lyrical content that is certainly not wholesome. So those things will be addressed in the regulations. We're in the process of getting all of the PR ready so that not only the general public, but also the owners of the vehicles, as well as the drivers and the conductors of the vehicles, will understand exactly what are their rights, but also their responsibilities in the whole thing. All right?
Yes, ma'am, last one. Come, this is the last person.
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister and the Cabinet. My name is Carol Farnham from West Harris, St. James. Carol Farnham. Okay, this may be a little different for the evening. It's more on a personal issue, but I have been reaching out for the last 20 years.
Hold on, if it's personal, we can deal with it. But I don't want people giving personal
not personal, but it's to deal with the issue I have.
Well, that's why I said if it's personal, let us deal with it, because I don't feel people should have to make their matters personal above.
So Roy, take the information and we'll get it straight off. You don't have to worry about that. You understand? I get daily reports from Mr.
I don't mind hearing it.
Yeah, but I don't want to make it a habit. I do not support people and will not encourage people coming to make public their personal issues, because the government must do better than that. And that's why we've put the citizen engagement unit there, and that is why we make sure every week, Mr. Morris will tell you at least over 100 people and things he's been giving me when the week come. He's made ministers' lives and public servants' lives focus on the issues that people write into my office every day about. The systemic ones go to the ombudsman. The individual ones, he resolves. Okay, where we can. And where we can't resolve, we also explain to you why not. Okay? So I'm not fobbing you off, trust me. Okay, we deal with these. All right? Right? Thanks. Thank you, ma'am.
One more presentation.
The Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources continues to upgrade and maintain road and drainage infrastructure in St. James. The parish has many natural watercourses which help to channel rainwater from the hilly interior of Barbados towards the sea. Several of these challenges within St. James are related to this phenomenon.
The entire district of St. James is at the bottom just before you get to the sea. The water runoff problems that we have because some people go and build water courses, and that was causing me as a problem because when they divert from there, go and flood up some person else. So that's where we have to act. Now we have then to find somewhere to restrict the heavy flow and the damages that it will cause to the residents in the area. Reconstructing the culvert at Burbage Road number 2. After that, reconstructed Highway 1, we had a lot of water coming down going on to the main road. It was causing some flooding, and only had in 2 grills. We reconstructed the culvert itself by putting in a whole set of grills right across the road from slipper to slipper in order to catch the water, which should go into the drain, go underneath the road and still go on the surface of the road, then go into the outfall drain into the sea. So we did that to alleviate that problem. We also did crush the site road because, as you know, we get a lot of water coming down from as far as St. Thomas right down, and it's like a waterfall coming down there. I was washing out the dirt and everything and bringing it onto the road, going under other person's cellar and what's not. So we had to go up there, dig out that, reconstructed a bouncer, which is an entrance, and then a slipper and a curb wall in order to keep the water on the road, stop it from affecting the residents there. There are 2 wells at the end of the road. We channel it, some will go into the well, and as you know, some will escape and continue to make its way down to other natural water courses and then go on to the sea. Presently, right now, we are here at Tainsville House in here. We had a problem here, so where the water, you can see what's going down here by these residents. So what happened is that we had to lick down the whole wall because it was an old wall 2 billion years ago, and we were reconstructing it. So right now we have the curb wall and the slipper and curb back here, so we just channel the water right to a manhole just short there and into that well. So that will stop the water from going down now and affecting the residents right below it.
MTWW's Drainage Division is also working to reduce flooding in St. James. Water courses and outfall drains are cleared frequently during hurricane season. After heavy downpours, a pump crew is usually dispatched to Trent's Tenantry to remove excess storm water. Flood mitigation work is planned for the area. In Wanstead, a stormwater well was constructed, and the drainage team is also digging a stormwater well in Kings Village. Road rehabilitation and reconstruction have been ongoing in St. James.
At Appleby Gardens right now, they are milling the road there because it has outlived its lifespan. But they are milling it and then they're going to repair it. Same that we're going to do at Appleby Garden is what the paving unit did with Jordan's Road and the development above Jordan Supermarket. We had a lot of manhole covers that were damaged by vehicular traffic, mostly commercial vehicles, and we had a lot of those ranging starting from as far as Fitz Village right down to Roadview. There are 1 or 2 well covers, 2 were up at uppermost stamps that we had to also go and reinstate it that had broken in.
Road reconstruction is ongoing in Rockdundle, St. James. So far, Most of the main road has been paved.
We've also done some curb and stepper work on the section and installed 3 wells so far. As you know, this road did not have any wells before, so taking the water off the road is paramount. We've also raised the level of the bridge down, approaching Gibbs back to Highway 1. As you know, again, the water, when the heavy rainfall comes through the gully, it normally topples the bridge. We've also been grading from Crishop and looking to tie back in the section to where we would have started paving between the 2 junctions.
We are replacing the distribution water main. We have actually completed the installation from Highway 2A to the bridge at the bottom of Rodondo heading towards Gibbs. Now that we've changed that, the main is unrestricted, and we found that there is a greater pressure affecting some of the other older side road mains in the area, which we're now in the process of replacing as well.
Routine maintenance such as pothole patching and debushing are periodically done throughout the parish. MTWW will continue to improve road infrastructure and drainage within St. James.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Prime Minister, your final word? Do you want to wrap up?
Thank you very much. I would just want to offer the 3 MPs the opportunity to close off with any closing remarks. Sandra?
Thank you, PM, and let me express our thanks for the work that has been done. There have been some units, some ministries that have stepped up and done some things for us in St. James South, and we are appreciative of it. We still have a few areas that need to be addressed, and we're looking forward to those being prioritized in these next few months so that we can get a lot more done. I want to encourage Barbadians, though. These sessions are important. They're important for us to come out and to speak and to share. This is how we participate in our own nation building, by contributing to the dialogue and looking at ways in which we can work and collaborate with the government, with the ministries to help make things happen within our communities to make community life better for all. So I just want to commend that to you. God bless you and have a good night.
Thank you very much. Eddie?
This has been, I think, a very useful session where people have been able to come and voice their community concerns to Prime Minister and other ministers. Thank you for your efforts and your time. And I want to thank the Prime Minister for having this initiative every month in a different parish. I think that is a fabulous initiative. And, you know, we look forward to Parish Speaks continuing. Thanks.
I too want to add a word of thanks to all of you who've participated. I want to just say one last thing very quickly. I think that there's an important takeaway that comes from this meeting. It is clear that sometimes there's a disconnect between some of the residents who I want to say are all very grateful for the interventions that are being made by all of the government departments. Because in many ways, the parish of St. James was neglected for a long time. But the disconnect can be overcome if, say, for example, the Water Authority, and I just give this example, uses the MPs. So that while Sandra and I are particularly pleased about the start of the work that will lead to the resurfacing of the road in Prior Park, we didn't know exactly when that work was going to begin. I discovered the Saturday morning when the pipes were being placed out there. And I think that sometimes it is easier for us to help you and to help the residents understand what you were asked about today, which is the scope of the works, how long it would take and so on, if you involve us more in the planning stages so that we can help to break the ice and make the process a lot easier. I was able to do this, Santia, with regard to Appleby Gardens because I discovered
early what was happening in Appleby Gardens, and I was able then, before I went to UN General Assembly with the Prime Minister, to actually go to every house out there to alert them to the fact that the work was beginning, what it was going to entail, etc., etc. And I think that just a simple takeaway, allow us as the members of Parliament to work with you in order to make life easier in all of the communities as you do this very important developmental work, which is essential in helping us to go forward. And with those few words, I want to urge you all to get home safely and wish you a good night. And thanks for coming.
Once again, I want to thank everyone for coming out. As I said, this is an essential part of our democracy, and I believe that where we can assist, we will do so. Where we can't, we need to be upfront with people so that we can build trust. But more importantly, as I said, there are a number of you who came with personal issues. We are going to accommodate them, as is done by the unit, and you will be hearing from them individually. As it relates to those people who are from St. Peter, where are you? If any of you are still here, I'll meet you to the side on my way out tonight. Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much. Good night to everyone. The next Parish Speaks will be Christ Church, and that will be at the end of October.